Greetings, one and all, and welcome to another edition of the Breakfast Club Jamboree. It's got that funk here, of course. Jive talking with some of my distinguished colleagues. Greetings, all. How's it going?
It's going pretty good.
Going good here.
Excellent. Glad to hear it. Sister Danger is otherwise engaged but present, and right on. So, I don't necessarily have anything, and I've been like dying to talk about this week. I gotta say, so if anybody has anything they want to jump in with, please feel free to do so. Alternatively, we can ask for comments from the viewers in the comment section if they want us to jump in on something, assuming they're not all trolls at this point.
Well, I assume that at the very least we should touch on Terry McAuliffe's defeat in Virginia. And unless you guys talked about that previously, I don't know.
No. Well, he hadn't lost yet,
Right.
and actually last weekend he was polling at like a point and a half ahead. So,
Yeah. Well, we're very used to Democrats, snatching defeat out of the jaws of anything that might be a victory. Although I'm not sure that a Terry McAuliffe win would have been a victory either.
Well, I don't know. I've never been to Virginia, so I actually have no opinion about what the political landscape is like in Virginia. Anything I said about it would be ignorant, basically. So suffice to say that I think the media has made more of a hype of it than they necessarily should, and they're all certainly on MSNBC anyway. They're gassing on as if it's the harbinger of doom for the Democratic Party. And don't get me wrong. The Democrats aren't necessarily in the best shape at the moment, but that's interesting on a number of levels to me. I mean, despite the pandemic, the COVID numbers are coming down, right? Job numbers are going up, stock market's higher than it's ever been, blah, 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 right? So, from a lot of standpoints, you would think the president would be more popular than he is at the moment.
Yeah, but it's the same thing that always, or at least in the last, couple of decades, always thinks Democrats is, and I haven't been to Virginia either, to be clear. But, looking into it at least a little bit, Virginia is a very, very, very working class state. It's a state of coal. It's a state of lots of retail workers and still fairly small towns for the most part. It's got
Virginia's really, really old America. I mean,
Yeah.
that's people have been living in Virginia as long as any place else. I should say colonizers have been living in Virginia ever since, whenever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a part of the country that does respond to anybody reaching out to workers specifically. The only reason Trump was able to win in Virginia was really based on the amount that he was appealing to coal miners and things like that and pretending to be a working class populace. And the idea that sort of the out of touch elitist side of the corporate Democratic Party can win in a state like that just seems preposterous to me. It's like the same kind of thing in New Hampshire, or there's probably a dozen or more states you can point to that have these very specific sort of although Virginia is not Rust Belt, but that kind of Rust Belt mentality, Wisconsin or Michigan or something like that, where you're not going to appeal to people with these with a culture war stuff is dumb. It's just not. Hello.
Hi.
So we're talking about how the Democrats are once again failing to utilize the fact that they do have a reasonable amount of power right now and could actually
Let me add to that they're not able to capitalize on the fact that the opposition party is blatantly, openly fascist and anti-democratic. And they're just like, well, the Republicans don't seem to respect democracy. Oh, no, really?
Yeah.
Well,
screaming, we're not Trump 1,000 times isn't policy.
Right.
Telling people that we're not going to deliver on any of the things we promised workers, that you got us into office on these promises that you're going to get a $2,000 stimulus check, and we're going to work on Medicare for all, and we're going to work on, reducing or paying off student loan debt. We're going to work on all these things. And the Democrats have consistently gone down the list of things that are overwhelmingly popular with everybody, 70% or more on most of these policies. And the Democrats are like, nope, we're not going to do that. Not going to do that. Definitely not going to do that. And no, you don't get any more money. But we are going to work on cutting more taxes for rich people. What's different than the Republicans in the 90s at this point?
Well, I mean, to be fair, there's a lot of stuff in the bill that is way different, and it's nowhere near what anybody really wanted, especially. And I think maybe they overshot the thing.
It's what Joe Manchin wanted.
Well, I mean, Joe Manchin, turned out to be the most powerful man in America this year, so far, but
I called it. I called it. I said that months ago.
Yeah.
Everything was going to, live or die on what Joe Manchin said.
Yeah, and it's not okay that the fate of 330 million people come down to the political donation concerns of one person in Congress.
One very right-wing person in Congress.
One person in Congress who was elected by like 350,000 citizens.
Yeah.
Who has a financial stake in fossil fuels.
Yeah. Huge, one of the highest financial stakes of any senator.
It's shocking to me that stuff like that's even allowed, but that's a whole nother conversation I don't want to go down. But no, there are certain things that have made it into the bill, and if the whole thing finally gets signed and passed and properly in place, like just the continuation of the child tax credit is going to make a huge difference to millions of people's lives. And it's going to be incredibly difficult for any future administration to undo it. I mean, once you start giving people hundreds of dollars a month for their kids, it's going to be really hard to just go, you know what, we're going to just like not give you that now and not care that you starve,
I think you're wrong about that. I think like we're at the point where I would be entirely surprised if anything that benefits working class people or poor people doesn't get cut, and doesn't get cut viciously. We're beyond the point, I think, where electoralism by itself is going to do anything. The only thing that's going to maintain any future for working people is the strikes that are starting to happen. We had a great October. If we start seeing a lot more actual direct action, like for all my kind of saying yes, go ahead, vote, do that kind of thing if it makes you feel good, like I believe in it less and less every day. It's more and more got to be about like chain yourself to something, freaking gum up the works and break stuff, and frankly break windows.
Right.
Like we're beyond the point where we can hope that
you can't
get them to vote us out of power.
You can't
themselves out of power.
You can't vote power away from the rich. You can't. You're not going to. We're not going to vote them away. They're not going to allow it. They won't allow it. They can't allow it. They can afford to buy senators. They can afford to pay for whatever they need to do to remain, in power. That's why the Patriot Act is still a thing. Is why they're still getting tax breaks when everybody else is like starving. But what we are seeing is what Jack said is workers are actually holding more power right now than they've held in a long time, and it's because of COVID.
Right.
And it's because that so many sectors of our society are dependent on minimum wage, low educated, low skilled people to get up and go to work. And more of them are realizing, fuck you.
Yeah.
I was going to add to what Jack was saying a minute ago as well, that one of the reasons that I think that something like the child tax credit might be, I don't want to say immune because that's too strong a word, but resistant to being revoked by future administrations of either party is like uh, even Republicans get that money, and they didn't have to ask for it. It just automatically started showing up in their bank account, right?
The
And when
problem
I
for
lived in the UK,
Republicans,
yeah, but when I lived in the UK, the Conservative Party, ever since I first moved there in 1989, has always been trying to get rid of the NHS. They're still trying to get rid of it now. And they also have this benefit called child benefit, which they pay you to have kids. Basically, that's an oversimplification. But if you have a kid, that you get a certain amount every month. If you have 2 kids, you get a bit more. 3 kids, you get a bit more, so on. And so that benefit, every Tory party has tried to get rid of, but you can't get rid of it because it benefits the whole country. The people, the Tories get it as well, and you just can't yank money out of people's banks when they're used to it coming in because they factored into their budgets. You know what I mean? It's necessary.
But this isn't the UK. White rural voters will cut off their own nose if they think it will hurt a black person's face, and like we absolutely see this all the time where the fact that the child tax credit exists, there is going to be some Republican who uses this very specifically and explicitly saying we shouldn't be, paying black people to have kids or whatever the angle, whatever the wedges that they want to use, they will absolutely use it. And it's going to work on a lot of people who would rather not get the credit than think about somebody who they don't like getting that credit.
Republican. Joe Manchin's already basically kind of said it. He's already said there's no work requirement for this credit. There's no income. There's no requirement for it. And it's like, dude, it's not supposed to be.
Well, yeah, that's the whole point. Yeah, you're a citizen, therefore you qualify. If you have kids, anyway.
Yeah, and unfortunately, like that's been leveraged before. Obviously, Reagan with the
welfare queens,
the welfare queen, or the Cadillac driver, or whatever it is, whatever the trope, and that was effective then, and it'll be effective again. I think working people absolutely need to find more solidarity and more. We need to start creating food drives for the people that are quitting these jobs, these low-wage jobs that aren't paying them enough to live. We need to start organizing to get groceries into the houses of the people who have quit these jobs, because there isn't a way for people to link together and collaborate if they can't survive on their own. And we have to start making it so that everybody who feels like they're being mistreated by their, fast food franchisee owner or whatever it is, has some alternative. Because the Republicans are going to make sure, and the Democrats, honestly, both sides are going to make sure that the amount of wiggle room to quit your crappy low-wage job disappears. That's what this whole nobody wants to work narrative has been about, is about turning it into a blame against people for not facing, the drudgery and dreariness of Taco Bell.
Right. Well, I think, like Ray just said a moment ago, so many people have woken up to this whole, I don't actually have to do this. I can demand better and get better. I mean, like I said a couple of months ago, here in Boulder, the local McDonald's is every job starts at $18 an hour. Go ahead, Sister Danger.
I don't know. I guess that I can't get over the feeling that what we're going to end up seeing is kind of along lines of what Jack was saying, but what we're going to end up seeing is that everybody who isn't in that elite, top 2% or whatever, are basically going to become more and more and more community minded individuals, where it's all about, giving to the group and helping everybody out and whatnot, while those 1% and 2% still stay up there completely untouched in their happy capitalistic world. And we are going to be expected to help uplift each other, while they still don't have to do anything. They don't have to change at all. They don't have to give anything into that pot. It's like, oh, look, all those poor people found a new way to help each other survive. So you guys keep doing that, and we'll just go ahead and keep making money off of you. You know, I can't help but feel that like that is what the real results of the direction we're trending is.
I mean, like some of that's like the libertarian goal for a lot of things is, community-based solutions, charity, why should the government do this or that, or why should they have these kinds of regulations when, your fellow man in the communities can help you take care of all that kind of stuff. And I mean, on the surface, I guess that makes sense. But the reality is eventually everybody then becomes too strained because all the resources are far too thinned out.
I would say
Howdy,
that.
Joe.
Hi, Joe. I would say that the preamble to the Constitution sort of answers that question about, what is the purpose of government? To establish, to promote liberty, establish justice, promote the general welfare, et cetera, all that stuff. You know what I mean? All that stuff is what they said it was for in the first place. And so ensure domestic tranquility is like the second or third thing on that list. And in order to ensure domestic tranquility, there can't be too much poverty, right? So that's a function of government that they seem to have completely dropped the ball on, if you ask me. And it's not enough of an answer, although it's part of an answer to say, that they're all bought by the elites, but it's not just that. There's no significant punishment anymore for misbehavior in politics. January 6th is evidence of that, and the recent election this week just goes to show that people are still like, they're just Republicans. They didn't all storm the Capitol, So.
Yeah, well, here's the other thing too. I want to address Duxilla real quick. See, here's the thing. I hear this a lot from people, and to me, this is one of the hugest mistakes anyone can make in politics. Because here's the thing. There are moneyed interests that spend quite a lot of money, one, trying to manipulate your vote, and two, trying to prevent you from voting. They wouldn't be spending that money if your vote was completely meaningless, if it was all, you know what I mean? Like, they do that on purpose because it's in their interest. They want you to be cynical. They want you to stay home because then you're basically giving away at least part of your voice. Sure, I know like Jack's very big on direct action, and that's important too. But
I think it's way more important now. It's getting more important every election cycle.
Fair enough, but I don't totally agree, but I don't think you're totally wrong either. But the whole thing is that basically, if you give, because quite frankly, a lot of people who take that kind of attitude, like Duxilla, they also don't participate in direct action either. So they're basically giving up 100% of their voice. They think it doesn't matter, and they basically allow those elites to run off with all the shit.
You know what matters? Stopping Joe Manchin's Maserati from leaving a parking garage. That's the only thing that's going to matter. And I think this answers Sister Danger's question about what happens to the rich elite who just get to sit in their ivory towers. Don't let them leave their ivory towers. Like, absolutely a lot more public interference with the movements and daily lives of these politicians is absolutely called for. And every article that says we need civility is a psyop, in my opinion.
Oh, on that score, Jack, I agree with you 100%. Hound the fuck out of these people, because you know what? It's called, when the money people do, it's called lobbying. It's the same thing. So it's direct lobbying, and it doesn't cost any money. So absolutely get out there and fucking, be a nuisance to these people. Because here's the thing, what a lot of people don't understand. I mean, most representatives have town halls, and generally, and again, with most representatives, you can schedule a meeting with your representative. So get in their face and tell them you think they suck and why they suck. Don't just tell them that they suck. Tell them why they suck and what you expect out of them. That's important. That's part of the equation.
Right. Oh yeah, that's having them know why they suck is very important. But at the same time, when someone is just trying to stop someone from leaving a place, I don't know if it's exactly going to change the way that they're going to, vote with their power. I don't know if it's really going to change much.
One bee sting is an annoyance, but 100 bee stings can kill you.
Yeah. Right.
Here's the thing. I don't think that they need to be told why they suck. I think they know why they suck, and I think they know they suck. I don't think they really care that people prevent them from leaving the parking garage or their rowboats up to their yacht. I don't think they care because the attitude is, "Hi, little people, fuck you."
I don't.
Yeah. That's my opinion on this too. I agree with you, Raven.
I agree, but here's one thing you should remember. Now, Raven, I know you were very active with Occupy Wall Street. If you recall, members of Congress were starting to get very nervous about it because obviously it took off around the whole country. It even started to spread outside of the United States. Unfortunately, there wasn't the follow-up, but it was getting attention because there were a lot of people out there saying we're not happy with this, and like I said, the fact that it petered out doesn't mean that it couldn't have had an impact. It just didn't.
It didn't peter out, though, and I think that's important to realize. I think it needs to be recognized. It was crushed. It was smashed. It was violently put down. And these are people that they're sitting in parks. They were sitting in parks. This wasn't obviously, right? It wasn't a violent movement. These weren't riots. They sat in parks. The vast majority of the time, they sat wherever their occupation was, and they gave speeches. That was most of their activities, and it was violently put down. People were hit by police cars and beat up by police, and they had their belongings, stolen. And I mean, it was violently put down.
I would add to that Occupy Wall Street brought to public awareness something that we all take for granted now because of Occupy, which is the concept of the 1%. And because there are genuine statistics, I don't know what it is now, but years ago, I remember reading on the window of Oxfam that like 5 people had equivalent wealth to half the population of the planet. 5, the 5 richest people. And that can only happen with a completely rigged system.
Well, the thing that gets me about that, Paul, is that situation isn't even good in a totally capitalistic framework. That's not good for capitalism.
Right. Money needs to circulate.
It's actually bad for capitalism, and that's what gets me. That's what freaks me out, because it's like even capitalists are actually hurting themselves with where things have gotten to.
Economically speaking, I can compare it to one of the shit cryptocurrency coins right now that it recently had a resurgence. It's called Shiba Inu, but it hit an all-time high. People made a lot of money. It made it to hundreds of percent of what it was weeks ago. Then people realized one person owns 20% of all the tokens. If that one person cashed out his like $5 billion worth of it, then everybody would be holding nothing. And then the price of it went all the way down when the news of that one wallet was spread around. If you know that there are billionaires, hundreds of billions of heirs that could basically build an entire city with their money, you know that there's enough money that they could just dilute everything that you want. They could buy up all the food in your state if they wanted.
Yeah, this is the actual fear that I'm going to get a little bit into modern monetary theory, which isn't, of course, accepted by everyone. And I'm an amateur, so I'm not going to be able to describe it perfectly. But there's this concept that we think about money incorrectly. We think that, we, the workers or the American people, we earn our money and then we pay our taxes, and our taxes are what the government uses to spend to do things. And this is the faulty belief that everybody has about the national debt. Of course, the money doesn't originate from us. It originates from the government. The government is what prints the money. So modern monetary theory talks about the government, and Stephanie Kelton in particular, who wrote The Deficit Myth. Book I recommend. I don't fully understand it, but it's very readable for the average person. The government has sort of a bathtub that would represent the total amount of money that can be flowing around in the economy. So the spigot obviously is where the money comes from. The drain is where the money disappears. And in MMT, money vanishes into nothing when it goes back to the government because it started from nothing. It's printed out of thin air. And so what the drain represents is when you're paying back government loans, government debts, things like that, or you're paying taxes. Now, the problem is billionaires come along with big buckets and they pull that money out of the bathtub, and they've got this big bucket of water, and then they stick it in a refrigerator and it turns to ice. And the only reason the bathtub doesn't overflow, and in this analogy, the overflowing bathtub is inflation. That's when all the prices go up and the whole system starts to fail. The reason they don't want to tax billionaires is they're afraid that the billionaires will de-ice that bucket of water that they have and pour it back into the bathtub, and then you get inflation. And so the government is terrified, or at least the people leveraging the economic levers of the government are terrified of actually opening that drain. They don't want deflation, they don't want prices to go down, and they don't want the billionaires putting their money back into the bathtub and overflowing the whole thing. And it means that they're going to let as many of us here at the bottom suffer as much as possible, just to avoid this scenario that they envision of, all that ice water going back in and totally overflowing the system with cheap money.
Duxzilla, Cal Exit and New England Independence, I think those are mistakes. But Texit, that can work.
Yeah, good riddance. I'll move to Texas and change their residency just to vote for that. Get rid of those fuckers. And while I'm down there, I'll rescue all my cool friends that live mostly in Austin and drag them up here. But I assume you guys were talking about the election results at some point earlier. My feeling, and this isn't the only reason, but basically the inability of the Democratic Party, and there's blame to go around, to get things passed. And of course, people don't look at the details. They don't look at, okay, well, this largely two people are holding everything up. They just see them collectively as the Democrats didn't get anything done, and they don't really give a fuck. So they just say, oh, the Democrats are inept, and without any context, and so then all Democrats suffer because of that.
So here's the problem with the argument that McAuliffe lost because Democrats don't deliver. When he took office as governor, he did. He changed a lot as far as programs and
Sure.
just state agencies and everything else. Virginia became a very progressive state under his guidance.
Right.
And why he didn't run on that? Why didn't he run a, hey, I gave you these things. You now get this from the state. There's this safety net or these programs or these benefits that you now get from the state. That, I'm taking care of you. We're taking care of you. Take care of me so I can continue to. Why he didn't run on that? I don't understand.
Because the Democrats have this incredible ability to snatch defeat from the jaws of victory. They and this is the one I would say of one of the many criticisms I hear from progressives about the rest of the party that I think is very appropriate is being bland, running bland campaigns. The Democrats are too timid. And Al Gore, it's the same thing. Al Gore, because he wanted to run away from Bill Clinton's zipper, he also ran away from Bill Clinton's record being the only president in like, I don't know how many decades to run a surplus and actually start paying the debt down. Now, so again, Gore was a moron because sure, he could have successfully simultaneously said, I rebuke what Bill did, regarding Monica Lewinsky. However, we did accomplish all this shit, and you'll get more of that good shit. And in fact, and I don't have the zipper problem that Bill has, so it'll be even better.
I get the zipper problem. I don't understand why Democrats think that way. If somebody in their party put their dick where it didn't belong, somehow it stains the entire party. That makes no sense to me.
I have a possible answer to the question, why don't Democrats, fight harder, play harder, blah, blah, blah. Because every single time a Democrat does, they get, you're too progressive, slow down, be moderate. You can't win.
Well, there's that, and now I'm going to dip into a little bit of conspiracy theory, but I don't think they really want to win. There's lots of times when we see it with Nancy Pelosi, where she would, rip the speech in front of everybody, and it's this grand gesture. Meanwhile, the very next day, she's signing, a $700 billion Trump, defense budget. So there's a point at which the Democrats like to keep on the good side of sort of the progressive American people, and largely with these policies that they know are popular with everybody. But because they are still essentially beholden to the same Wall Street people, and it's not like they're all in back rooms, although we did see that huddle with Sinema and Manchin and McConnell on the floor that looked very chummy in a way that certainly makes you think that at least some Democrats are working as straw bullies. But with Biden, like, how do we explain the Senate parliamentarian being the most powerful person in America for, just when they need to vote on something? There's these moments where it just strains
the
credulity.
But those rules didn't change. Those rules have been there. See, the difference is what changed wasn't the rules, it was the Republicans. Because again, in the past, even the shittiest Republicans in the 80s, 90s, and aughts, still effectively played by the rules. But the modern, basically since 2008, they basically said they don't give a fuck about the rules. And unfortunately, we mentioned before, they don't ever.
That's very convenient for the Democrats when they don't want to pass something.
Well, I mean, the parliamentarian got that newfound power the same place that Joe Manchin did. It's a 50-50 Senate.
Right.
I mean, if there were enough votes, nobody would give a shit what the parliamentarian had to say.
I just want to jump in real quick. And Joe, with respect, I don't think that McConnell necessarily breaks the rules. I think the problem is that he uses the rules to defeat the spirit of the rules.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
You know what I'm saying? Like this whole thing about, trying to get 60 votes. The purpose of that, as was explained to me when I was like 12, was that, that way you get middle of the road stuff, nothing too extreme on either direction, because you have to get compromise. That was the whole point. And so both sides had to go into it with this understanding that we're going to have to compromise. And whoever's the president, we need that person to be successful, whichever party it is, because if the president is successful, the country is successful. That was how I was raised to believe politics was supposed to be. And I think that's just gone out of the conversation completely now.
Oh, well, it has. And the thing is, I'm sorry, Jack. I'm not going to go with you down that conspiracy road. I just don't. The thing is that okay? I'll tell you why did Nancy sign that bill? I'll tell you right now. Because when it comes to issues of defense, the Democrats are timid. They've been timid since the 80s, of worried getting hit over the head.
Somebody's paying them to be timid. That's the thing. They get, like, Pelosi isn't the only person in her caucus who gets military contractor money.
I didn't interrupt you, Jack. Can I finish my statement? So the whole thing is that going back to the 80s, is that anytime the Democrats tried to put the brakes on the military, then the Republicans beat out the drum. Oh, the Democrats are weak on defense, and it would cost them. So they're timid, and they've been timid on way too timid on too many things. But and the thing is that okay, even the defense stuff. I mean, now remember also the other thing that they had things like the F-35, where it's not them getting any money directly, but it's the fact that their districts are all getting jobs. They're all getting, and so the jobs equal votes. So the F-35, as much as it's a shitty program and it's now an aircraft that's obsolete and should be getting replaced already, but because it's in like 47 states are building this fighter, no one's gonna cut it because that means jobs out of their district.
So you mean to tell me that Democrats are universally timid along party lines, and that the same people who are so timid about how they vote in Congress or in the Senate were not too timid to get elected in the first place and to fight for their position every couple of years?
Because they're in districts that are, because if you look, actually the Democrats lose since the 90s. The Democrats have only had the House about half the time because for exactly that reason, because they don't always win those districts. So the Democrats had the House for like 50 years solid, where they had it like locked up 50 years straight, and then in 94 the Republicans took control, and then since that time it's been about 50-50.
Yeah.
So there's like two things that Democrats can't ever vote against, and that's defense and law enforcement.
Right.
Because then they will get beat the shit out of them every election.
Yeah, well, they get beat to shit out of them every election because they're.
I mean, it'll be even worse. It would be even worse because they would be basically bludgeoned with the fact that they voted against a defense bill or law enforcement. They would bring them out into the street and drag them up and down the street with it. They would, and they would lose, and they would lose badly, much worse than they do now.
Clearly, Biden's gone back on any ideas of police reform, since he's been in office. This isn't going to help Democrats with the majority of people, certainly not with people who have their lives affected by bad policing.
Actually, Jack, and I'm going to interrupt you now. I was reading an article about this a few months ago. That there was a lot of like we had the protests and everything that was really great, and a lot of pro reform feeling. Well, actually, the support among whites for police reform is actually lower now than before the protests.
Right.
So that's the reason why. And so basically, white people vote more percentage wise than black people do. So white people don't.
Gee, I wonder why.
So as a result, so it's not as much of a priority.
Yeah, and the Democrats will continue making sure that it's not a priority, in part because there's a lot more money to be made in voting the way they do. Like, you're never going to get multi-millionaire Nancy Pelosi if she's operating in the public interest. Like, every one of these people, with very, very few exceptions, are making insane amounts of money in a way that, is not explained by their government paychecks or their, book deals or anything else. And as long as we see this kind of, frankly, it's just corruption. It's just like, it's beyond just lobbying. It's the fact that they exist in a world where they will only ever get far richer by being in that position. Of course, we can't trust the Democrats. And, you you don't think it's a conspiracy, but it is a lot of money that goes into their bank accounts constantly that gives them plenty of impetus not to feel particularly threatened by the general populace. And this is why I'm more and more certain that, stopping Joe Manchin in a parking garage and making lives of everybody in Congress, literally everybody, I don't care where they are on the political spectrum, a lot more difficult until they start recognizing the average person on the street and the average American is struggling and needs some help.
Well, I think there's, thankfully, there's some members of Congress, at least, who have been in those positions, like Corey from St. Louis, for example.
Corey
and
Bush.
Yeah, Corey Bush. I was struggling for her last name. It started with a B, and I'm like, no. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, she's been homeless. She's been a single parent. She has made it all the way from there into the halls of government. So I think that's pretty amazing. And I hope that she doesn't get ground up in the machine like happens to so many people who start off in politics with all the best intentions and end up, not.
Well, as I said before, we know that the sharp elbows get sanded off over time. There was a time when Nancy Pelosi was very pro universal health care. And that Nancy Pelosi is 20 years in the rearview mirror at least. I think it was 94 that she talked about universal health care.
Right.
So we aren't going to ever expect that Democrats are going to make things better. The very most that they're going to do is sort of hold the line against the worst extremes of the Republican Party. That doesn't make them on our side. That doesn't make them allies to us, we the people. And this is why, vote if you want. It's like it does no harm to send your ballot in or whatever, but like really it is not what's going to save us. And again, climate change is the monster that's right around the corner, and it's going to get worse, and we're going to see things get a lot worse.
Well,
yeah, but just want to add in very quickly. Rioting isn't going to save us either, though.
Right.
I don't support rioting. Obviously, like direct action is thoughtful, considered action that is targeted to a very specific result. So I'm saying, chain yourself to something, have very specific protests that gum up the works, that make life difficult. And I don't totally know what the ultimate result is making sure politicians can't go about their daily lives. But at the very least, it makes it a lot more or a lot less comfortable for them to be in the world. And if they're going to make our lives less comfortable, we might as well return the favor.
Well, I think there's a strong argument for saying that. I mean, the fact that Joe Manchin, as you said, has all these interests in fossil fuels shouldn't be allowed from an ethical standpoint, obviously. And it's also true to say, I mean, obviously the members of federal government deserve to be well paid for what they do so that they're less prone to being corrupted. But, that's not what happens. They're still corrupted. So from my point of view, they need to, in some European countries, not all that long ago, members of parliaments would be riding on the tube, on their way to work. They wouldn't have a limousine or a chauffeur-driven car or whatever. They'd be like everybody else. Yeah, just on the tube, going to work. I mean, I used to be friends on YouTube with a user called Laura Lila, and she grew up in the Houses of Parliament, meaning that her mother worked in the Houses of Parliament. So she spent her whole childhood after school every day in the Houses of Parliament. And one of the things that she used to remark on is back in the 70s, she's about the same age as I am. And back in the 70s, they used to have this brown toilet paper, the kind that comes off in little sheets of squares. It's like brown and it's like basically soft cardboard. And that's what they had because it was being paid for by the government. So they weren't going to have anything luxury because it's public money and you don't waste public money on luxuries. That was the zeitgeist under Harold Wilson in the 70s, right? That sort of socialist idea is gone. You know what I mean? Trying to keep expenses down for government is gone. These people in government now, I mean, when Ben Carson was a member of Trump's administration, he paid about $30,000 for a door to his office,
So, I mean, I think I'm going to jump on to what Kazum said. I think we need to be careful also about what we call a riot. There were a lot of actions and a lot of activities over the summer that were not riots, that were called riots, because calling something other than what it is a good way to get negative feelings towards it.
Well, especially particularly for the police, because once a protest is declared a riot, they have more latitude in the amount of violence that they can commit against the crowd. So very often they would provoke people by committing acts of violence, getting people to respond, and then using that as the pretext to
Right.
now it's a riot and we can blow everybody away.
I also don't think that a riot in and of itself is necessarily a bad thing or something that we should there should never ever happen.
Look at Stonewall.
Yeah, look at Stonewall, right? I mean, so look at like what Shadow said in the comments, right?
Which the majority of people were against Stonewall at the time.
Yeah,
but Sirius had mentioned that when it comes to the way that people vote and such things like that, people were less likely to be for police reform after the riots than before. So if the riots are doing the opposite of what they're intended,
like I said, not everything that we saw was riots. That's number one. Number two, that word riot gets thrown around in order to create negative feelings about what the people who are engaged in protest are trying to get. So
but that just means that people need to be that much more careful. Right. The left needs to be that much more careful in the way they message, because their messaging has been terrible. Their messaging has been terrible. We've talked about this before.
Okay, you keep interrupting me. You keep interrupting me. Like Shadow had said something earlier, and I was going to talk about the wisdom of the '60s, right? So Kennedy had said, those who make peaceful revolution impossible make violent revolution inevitable. And that is a truth that apparently a lot of people have forgotten. It absolutely is a truth. So when you make it impossible for people to change their environment through peaceful means, you're going to get riots. And more wisdom from the '60s. Martin Luther King Jr., right? The riot is the voice of the unheard, right? Isn't that pretty close to his quote, right?
But I also needed to correct Kazoom, because I did not say riots. I said protests, and there's a reason why. Because it wasn't. It was not the fact that people cared less afterward, according to the article, was not a result of people being turned off by rioting. They were just basically disaffected. Like they went out there, they patted themselves in the back, they did their thing, and then they went home, and then they stopped giving a shit. So, because to them, see, for a lot of people, this is the problem with active, and this is one of my problems with having only direct action as being the only thing that people do. Because for some people, direct action, they went out there and they protested, great. They feel they did their job and they went home, and now there's nothing not needed. And that's not Jack. Obviously, Jack is someone who committed to this. But there's a lot of people who do the half-ass version and they think they're done. And that's not it. That's why, to me, if anyone who does not take a holistic approach to the whole thing, because even as far as tracking down people and members of Congress, there's certain people that will work against and certain ones that don't. If anything, you at least want to vote for the people who are being most affected by getting hounded to shit.
I just wanted to add to the about to riot or not to riot or whatever. I would never advocate rioting, and I've been to so many demonstrations over the past 7 or 8 years when I was living in the UK, and I have really strong feelings about. I mean, if you're gonna take it upon yourself to be an activist and go to a demonstration, you have to have an attitude and a mentality about you, which basically is anti-violent for one thing, because anytime you get tens of thousands of people in enclosed close space, there's an easy potential for things to go wrong really easy, even with the best of intentions. And as I've said before many times, they always are going to have people using the cover of a crowd for bad intentions who have nothing to do with the demonstration. That's just a given. So there's always that. I would never advocate for rioting or for violence, but I recognize that many times in history, violence does end up causing or leading to the intended result. I'm thinking of not just Stonewall, but I mean, there's an example. I remember in South Africa, there was a demonstration, and long story short, they just mercilessly gunned down like 500 people, and the whole world's like, whoa, 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 whoa. If you do it one at a time, apparently that's okay. But if you do 500 at a time, somehow that will get a reaction, and it did totally changed the conversation, because prior to that, it was all, you have to respect our sovereignty and all that bullshit.
The American Revolution, there's another example for you.
Yeah, I just know that right now, with the fact that we've got these around and we've got people like Andy Ngo around, we have to be very careful about the way that we push our messaging. We have to be very, very careful. Everyone has to be careful, because we're on film and someone can cut a piece of what we're doing out and use it as propaganda. So we have to be extra, extra careful now. And I just can't stress that enough.
I don't think that the concern about being careful should negate the action to change things, because if police are murdering an average of 1,100 people a year, and that average actually went up in 2020 and in 2021, then, and no other country has police murder that many people. It doesn't matter how bad riots look if the problem is that you have an unaccountable police force that is killing people, completely at levels that no other country has even close to. The demand to be careful about how we look it's like, be careful how you fight against slavery. We don't want people to vote for slavery by making the abolitionists look bad or something like that. And I'm not saying that that's exactly the argument you're making, and I don't want to frame it that way. Just that there are things that our government and our authorities are able to do which are really, really ugly and criminal. And the response to those things are going to often have a pretty, high degree of tension involved, a high degree of conflict involved. And, as Got That Funk said, there are going to be people who set dumpsters on fire and things like that. We can't be overly cautious about the messaging, because the problem is huge. And the same thing with climate change. If we all... if we all run out of breathable oxygen or have,
there are no jobs on the planet.
Yeah, there's a level of threat that exists that requires.
But there's a balance, man. I understand what you're saying, but there has to be a balance. You can't just push some message that's like, how about all caps are bastards, right? How about that message, for instance? It's supposed to mean that all police are part of a system that's messed up, but that's not how people take it. People take it as if they take the message literally. All cops are bastards. That was dumb messaging. That was stupid messaging. And there's a lot of things we need. I'm just saying there's a lot of things we need to be careful of. We can't repeat that again. We can't push that. We can't be that stupid in our messaging again.
Here's the thing. There's no such thing as good enough message. Like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because people who are going to stand against you are going to twist what you say anyway. It doesn't matter.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
No, it doesn't. We live in a day and age when they can create video footage of you saying something with words that never, ever came out of your mouth anyway. And they do that shit all the time.
But you still have to be careful.
Why? Because you might offend the other side? Fuck the other side. That's the whole point.
Well, here's the other thing.
That's a really messed up attitude as far as I'm concerned. Sorry, man. Fuck the other side. It's saying fuck the other side. It's saying fuck the other side. Our messaging doesn't matter. Fuck at the other side.
Climate change. Kazum, do you have children?
No.
So you don't have a horse in this race, as far as I'm concerned. I have kids, and I want them to be able to eat food that grows out of the ground when they grow up. I want them to be able to drink the fucking water. I want them to be able to give me grandchildren and great-grandchildren, whether I'm alive or not. So I actually have an investment in this where you don't. And
what does that have to do with whether messaging gets to people or not? If we say
shut the fuck up and let me say it. If the other side gets pissed off because I am an asshole because I don't want them to profit off of my kid's future, so I'm going to watch what I say, No, fuck that. Fuck them if they don't like it. I'm going to say what needs to be said to create the change that needs to be made in order to save the entire fucking species.
But if the messages you're pushing turns off more people than it brings in, then it's not going to help.
But it won't.
But it was just proven. It was just proven this.
For police reform, because a lot of white people watch Fox News.
But this happens in a lot of things, man. There's so many instances where this happens.
Hey, I got a message for you, Vegas. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you, Brandon. That's the message.
I just want to add real quick. I'll let you go in a second, Mike. But I just want to add, as kind of obvious point. But I mean, you do not need to be a parent to care about the future. So I just wanted to put that in there. Go ahead, Mike. Mike, you're
muted.
That's exactly what I was going to say. You can't deny Kazum a concern for humanity and say that he's not invested in humanity just because he didn't give birth to children. He, in fact, is of the persuasion that he wouldn't procreate from his normal love-making capabilities, right? That's fucked up to say that just because he doesn't have kids, he doesn't care about the earth.
And I'll say, as somebody who's never going to have kids and doesn't want kids, I am hair on fire, what's left of it, for the environment.
I just want to discuss this comment real quick. I'll put it up. Too far gone to change at this point. Trump has shown this. I respectfully disagree with that. I think if you can change people from what they used to be to what they are, they can go to something else as well. I honestly believe that people, don't really want the nation to burn. I really don't think they do. You know what I mean? I think everybody talks a tough game, but at the end of the day, no one wants to be that person who has to beg for food or whatever, because already supermarkets are like depleted because of the supply chain issue. And if there is ever the whole electric boogaloo number 2 or whatever the fuck these people are wanting, what's happening now is a tiny taste of what's to come.
Well, and here's the other thing too, and I get your point, Kazum, and I'm not going to say you're all wrong, but the thing that I get pissed off about is that people will look at the violence and from the riots, right? Okay, but at the same time they're completely ignoring the violence that was being perpetrated initially. So a riot, if there was just a random flash riot out of nowhere for no reason, I'd go, holy fuck, those people are horrible. But when people try for peaceful means and they keep getting shot in the face and no one gives a fuck, at a certain point they're going to step out and say, I have had enough. I tried your way and you shot me. And I'm not going to take this shit any fucking more.
It's the thing about, it's not the right way to protest, but then nothing is ever the right way to protest.
Right. Yeah. So, and I want to go back to here. Shadow said it and Raven brought it up. What have I said many times? It's not exactly this, but I've said, if people are not willing to accept reasonable solutions, they will eventually be forced into unreasonable solutions, because people can only get pushed so far. And so it's the same thing I say to the gun people. Like, if they're not willing to have reasonable gun regulations, okay, they say it's mental illness, fine. Let's do something to stop people that are violently mentally ill from getting weapons. And they don't do that either. So that gets me to the point where I'm like, well, fuck you and your Second Amendment, because you're not willing to even do the things you say are the problem. You're not willing to do reasonable solutions. You're not even willing to give us a solution when you tell us that you know the problem. So fuck you and your Second Amendment. I don't care whether you're mad at someone's going to take away your gun. Fuck it, I don't care. And it's the same thing here. If I got to worry every time I get pulled over that if I just get the wrong itchy stringer motherfucker who just wants to blow me away, that I just have to deal with that. And when I say, please, somebody help me and help the people like me, and the rest of the country goes at a certain point. So I didn't condone the violence, but I don't condemn it either.
My attitude is, if you're going to go to a demonstration with the goal of being violent, you're part of the problem. But if violence happens at a demonstration, or even if you go prepared for violence, because for example, the nature of what you're protesting might have counter demonstrations, and you're knowing that, and you better be careful. You might want to have goggles, for example, just to give one sort of precautionary thing.
So like
violence is necessarily indicative of violent intent.
Let me again one more thing real quick. And the other thing, and what did I say while the protests were happening? When the police came dressed for war, there was war. When the police came peacefully, there was peace. There was almost no rioting in places that the police didn't show up minute one in full tactical gear with armored vehicles and stun guns and rubber bullets.
Newark, Patterson, Camden, right in here in New Jersey. I mean, there's great examples right there. The police actually in Camden linked arms with the protesters, and there was no riot. There was a lot of protesting, lots of protesting.
In some cases, though, the police linked arms with protesters and took a knee and did a bunch of other stuff while the cameras were there, and then 15 minutes later came in with truncheons and tear gas.
Yeah.
And that happened in Portland. It happened in tons of other cities. And the police were happy to get the positive press for themselves, and then the cameras went away and they did exactly what they normally do. And this is why I'm also going to go to this idea of all cops are bastards. It's not harsh enough. It's not a like strong enough condemnation of what police forces in America have become. And if people find ACAB to be like too offensive, then they're very much not offended by what the police are actually doing. And then the third thing, and I'll shut up, is that just go back and look at any of the comic strips, political cartoons about Martin Luther King back in the 60s. You know, Martin Luther King, the American hero that we think of today, was completely like, tarred and feathered by the press, trying to make him into this, this mad like minister of violence, and it's.
Here's why I think ACAB is accurate, and why I think it's fair. The system is set up in a way that it has to be accurate. It has, like the individual policemen have no control over whether or not they're bastards, because the entire system is set up to destroy good cops. You can't be a good cop and be a cop. You can't. It cannot happen, because as soon as you do what you should do as a good cop, you get destroyed. Your career is destroyed. You're drummed out of the force. You're facing bullying and threats and intimidation from police. So the entire system is set up so that good cops don't exist. They can't exist.
Right. And there's multiple examples of that where whistleblower cops try to say, hey, here's some dirty cops doing some, selling drugs, beating people up, whatever they're doing.
Planting evidence.
And they don't sanction the bad cops. They sanction the cops who are the whistleblowers. Or worse yet, they get death threats and attacks on their family because they stepped out of line, and they weren't supporting their brothers, because of course supporting your brothers means supporting even their illegal activity. So
now that's not to say it never happens. There have been good cops who have stuck it out and they brought their fellow uniformed policemen to justice, but it's so rare because most of them can't deal with the pressure that ends up on them or their family, and the threats and the violence and everything. It's really rare.
I wish there was some sort of
basically turning the police into a gang. I mean, it's a gang mentality and a gang functionality. Go ahead, Kazum.
I wish there was more of a push for. It's like there are some people who even try to say abolish the police. I wish people would say abolish police unions, because the unions are a huge part of what keep people that are corrupt in their position. They don't even get punished. Nothing happens to them. And
the only union I don't support.
Well, and right-wingers will constantly use that as sort of a gotcha moment. Oh, liberals and the left support unions, but not the police union. I mean, it's a dishonest tactic, because, of course, a police union is a very different thing than, the IATSE or the Steelworkers Union or anything like that, and we can go into why they're so different. But yeah, there's plenty of people who say abolish police unions.
Well, what's funny, what's interesting about that point, Jack, is that the right wing is totally against public sector unions, except for the police union. They're in Minnesota. They actually literally tried to destroy, like outlaw public sector unions, except for the police union.
So, Deep Ashtray is saying we're on the edge of a society-wide psychotic breakdown, kind of like a culture of butterfly. Yeah, we are. I mean, we were like, this country has always been kind of a pressure cooker, but every now and then there's like, a relief, but it's been a long time, and we've all been forced into this, COVID pot. And the pressure just keeps ramping up and ramping up and ramping up. I mean, there's a lot of issues, and it does feel scary, and it does feel like everything's about to just explode. It's frightening.
The COVID thing has put like a polish and a fine point on, I think anyway, this whole program of fear that's been forced down our throats ever since September 11th. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but it's also exposed a lot of rifts in our society and a lot of inequality that was hidden before. COVID, forget about the illnesses and the deaths. I mean, just what it has done to us as a society is
up here
kind of astounding. Yeah.
I'm curious what.
Go ahead.
I'm curious what all y'all think with all this argument over riots and whatever. After witnessing what we've witnessed, what with Portland and all the other places, last year, is this kind of direct action even the best or right kind of direct action, right? Because there is so much at risk for the average person to go out and even demonstrate and then potentially get caught up in a riot that has turned violent. And even just being hauled off and booked has huge ramifications on just your average person's daily life, right?
I hear what you're saying, but I mean, if people in Hong Kong or Belarus,
let me finish.
can demonstrate.
Like, what I'm trying to say is, I sort of agree with what Jack is saying, is that that making these folks' lives difficult is really where it's at. It's basically like, punching them in the proverbial wallet, if you will. But that can be done without there being even a demonstration. That can be done guerrilla tactics. That can be done 2 or 3 people at a time, Fight Club style, right? I mean, where you just go out and you just say, no, you laugh, but I'm serious. That's what we're talking.
I knew what you meant. I just thought it was a good turn of phrase.
I mean, that's what that seems like. It's almost the way to go, because it's so much harder to identify. Even if it wasn't that hard, if a particular geographical area was inundated with a bunch of little BS crimes like this that do nothing but just, cause, just like when you would go around slashing tires or something in high school, like you think it's funny, haha, but you don't know that it costs somebody, $300 a tire or something to replace, just a pain in the ass. But it's like, if there's enough of that, there's no way that the police can handle that. It's an overload on that system. It's way safer for a group of individuals to just go and,
I don't think.
Not that I'm like advocating crime, but I'm just like, maybe the approach here isn't the right approach.
Yeah, but how would they know? How would they know what the motivation behind the people doing it would be?
That's number one, and number two, I don't think that the whole thought process is, hey, let's go out and commit some crimes so we can change the world. I mean, I just. The crimes end up happening because of group mentality, the things that happens when you have large numbers of people together. The crowd becomes an organism.
I mean, if you really wanted to make a political statement, you kind of, you don't have to know, if you were to observe something like that happening in your area, then that, and there's no apparent person to claim the credit for that, then that's the time that actual political groups can step in and quasi-claim credit, even though they had nothing to do with it as an organized factor. Just like you see terrorists going, oh, a bomb went off there. That was our organization, even though it wasn't, right? Like, you don't have, like, those things, I don't know. I guess
that second thing actually rarely happens. Most of the time, at least with, well-known terrorist organizations, they don't claim credit for things they didn't do because it doesn't always align with their motivations. But you're right, it has happened occasionally.
I don't know, I guess I just feel like there's so much more on the line for the average citizen to try to protest for their own well-being.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think this whole idea of sort of harassment activism isn't necessarily bad on its face, but it has the capacity to backfire. I mean, Raven, had you won your election, you might have people outside your house, saying, I don't want critical race theory in my school, or whatever the fuck these people are saying. You see what I'm saying?
I had people outside my house anyway.
Oh, right.
So.
I mean, anything can backfire.
Raven, like no change, situation normal.
I just checked out billboard prices in West Virginia, right next to where Joe Manchin's office would be, and top peak price for any of them is like $5,319 for an entire month. I'm leaning towards the message of Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema are the reason we don't have universal health care. Plain, right? Now,
Joe Manchin wants grandma to die.
Well, that could work too. But I want to put it that way. Now, Kazoo was on the end of like nuance matters, and you can't have like blunt statements like that. And then you guys were against it. But here's Joe saying, no, that might actually play in his favor in West Virginia. I can read Joe's eyebrows saying that. You're just helping him.
See, here's the thing. I mean, I think it was Jack that made the point about, Joe Manchin and having interest, and other people said, it should be illegal. See, the thing is, even if, just say, pretend for the sake of argument that Joe Manchin had no connections to oil and gas. He does, but just pretend for a second he doesn't. His state still does, though, and that's actually why he is able to. He won at a time when a state that Trump won by a ridiculous margin. He still held his seat because it's a very right-wing state. They're very oriented toward mostly coal. So if you go, it doesn't matter. You could probably get away with doing anything else, but as long as you keep the coal people happy and what's left of the steel people happy, they're probably going to vote for you. So basically, and this is one of the things that came up, like I remember a number of years ago, Cory Booker. So Cory Booker voted against a bill that Bernie had put up. And so a lot of progressives got very angry with him. But then he co-sponsored a bill with Bernie. And part of the reason why he did that is that New Jersey is heavily it's on a per capita basis, it's the most heavily invested in pharma in the country. So, keeping farmer jobs here is important to people who live here, even the left leaning ones. So they came to some compromise, and that Bernie was happy with, and they put out another bill. So my thing was like, well, it wasn't like he totally threw it out. He still came back and did something, was just modified, because they are supposed to deal with the interests of the people in their state. So it wasn't that he was.
Here's the problem with Manchin.
In the pocket of pharma.
Yeah, here's the problem with Manchin, though. I mean, he basically did that. Like, he basically did that. He's like, okay, this bill isn't going to work. I'm not going to support this. So I'm going to sit down. I'm going to write one that not only I can support, but the other side will come along with too.
Right.
And when he was done and went up for a vote, the other side basically told him to go fuck himself. And you would think that would have been enough for him to say, you know what?
I think the what's really bad about the whole Joe Manchin situation is how he's basically not he doesn't negotiate in good faith. It seems kind of obvious to me because like when he did that negotiation maybe 2 or 3 months ago with Bernie, and Bernie was saying they wanted a $6 trillion package, and Joe Manchin at that time was saying $2 trillion, and so the compromise they came up with was $3.5 trillion, which is a brilliant compromise because it's less than halfway between. So Joe Manchin seems to win on that front, but it's 75% more than Joe was offering in the first place. So Bernie wins on that front. So that was a perfect compromise. But it turns out that $2 trillion wasn't even Joe Manchin's number.
Right.
He wasn't even prepared to go that high. So the whole thing is just bad faith all around. I mean, Joe Manchin's whole negotiation with Bernie in that instance was to stop $6 trillion being the talking number that we negotiate down from, and negotiate down from $3.5 trillion, because there's no way you can arguably negotiate down from $6 trillion to 1.7 or whatever the fuck.
1.75, yeah.
I mean, there's no law that billboards have to tell the truth, right?
Well, now the one thing we'll say, mentioning, and he did fall on his face with that first compromise bill. Now they ended up getting Republicans to vote for the second bill, which is actually the one that the House voted on last night.
Yeah, but it's a fraction of what they had initially wanted. And yeah, I mean, I know it's a game of compromise. Everybody loses, everybody walks away with something and everybody loses something. And that's the way that the system should work. But it's just like Obamacare, right? They lost way, way, way more, than they had said that they would, than they had initially bargained for. I mean, it was just like, Obama with Obamacare went in basically at his floor. You know what I mean? It was just like, and there was nowhere to go but down. He lost everything.
Right.
And then with this, they just kept giving everything away because Manchin had so much power and was clearly in cahoots with McConnell.
Yeah. Now the final bill was 1.2 trillion, and of new spending it was 555 billion.
Right.
And not insignificant, but
right. And it's all paid for.
Right.
It's not insignificant new spending, but it's 2/3 of the military budget.
Right. I mean? and that was something else. Like people were talking about, oh my God, 3.75. I think that's what it was. I think 3.75 trillion was initially what they wanted. That is insane. That's crazy. But it was actually less over 10 years than the military budget, than the defense budget. And it was just like, so you're okay with them spending more than that on defense in 10 years than on your roads and the power? Really? I mean, that's
been okay about that for the past 40 years, though, Raven. That's the problem.
But here's the thing: is I don't think enough people have said outright, though, they're spending more on this than they're spending on your ability to have power and water and get to work.
And the thing that irks me, and mind you, again, I think it's not wrong in saying that on this panel, I am the least, or I won't say I'm the most pro, but maybe the least anti military spending as of the group. So but the funny thing is, even just from a straight military perspective, not only do we spend more than double what our two likely adversaries spend combined, but we're not even getting a good results from it, because I mentioned the F-35. That's just one program that's fucked up. They spent billions of dollars on like a few ship classes. Like there was one that they got. It's the Zumwalt, which basically was originally supposed to be a ship that would fire because there's no battleships anymore, and most ships don't have much in the way of guns. So it's supposed to be a ship that could basically support an amphibious landing with high velocity artillery, basically.
So I have a friend, Al. You got Al.
Yeah, can I finish?
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So the thing is that, as it turns out, what they actually ended up designing a ship that actually has no guns and it literally has no role. The roles that it could have done don't exist anymore. So we spent $2 billion on a ship that's literally worthless. and said it's going to be so, and it's going to get decommissioned soon. So it was in service for like 13 years with no role, and now it's going to be decommissioned. And then there's a whole bunch of other ships that they built because someone got a harebrained scheme of we need ships that really are not designed for heavy ocean going. They're designed to defend the coast. And then we decided that that role is pointless and we don't need it. So 80 ship, like they originally were going to buy 80 ships. They cut it down to 60, and they're all going to go out of service too because they're basically. So it's like we're just pouring money in. If we were actually getting something amazing for that money, I might say, well, okay, I can see why we're doing it. But it's not even doing anything useful, and our defense, the defense of the nation and our interest is actually going down at a time when we're spending more money than we could ever possibly conceive.
Yeah, isn't there something with aircraft that the same way? We spent a whole bunch on aircraft that we're not even going to ever use.
Well, there was one airplane that can't fly in the rain, which is kind of useless. They spent billions and billions on this plane, and it's stealth. And when it rains, the stealth technology didn't work for whatever reason. They can't fly it in the rain. So I have a friend, Al. Joe knows Al. I'm not sure if anybody else here knows Al, but Joe knows Al. He actually works. He's a civilian employee for the United States Army, and he works at Picatinny Arsenal. And they do a lot of Picatinny,
yes.
Picatinny Arsenal, and they do a lot of weapons designing there. They develop weapons there. It's not just an arsenal, but they also build and they invent weapons. And he actually created the rounds that are used on the turrets that they used on some of the equipment they used over in the Middle East. It's really cool. He has a whole breakdown of the round. Anyway, one of the things that they developed there is a gun that shoots lightning and can shoot. It shoots lightning, and it can shoot lightning around corners. And it's really cool, and they spent billions of dollars on it. I've never seen one used.
We haven't had Thanos.
Yeah.
Seriously.
So, I mean, that's money that was just spent. It's just gone on a piece of technology. While cool, because it is cool. When are we going to use that? We're never going to use it.
Not to mention there's things that they try to develop, and then turns out like, we just spent like $40 billion developing this thing. It doesn't actually work the way we thought it would.
Have they even? Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Kazim. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, have they even used that? There's some supposed thing where they can point this microwave technology, where they point it at someone and make them feel like they're burning, and that's what. Have they even really used that yet? I know I've read a whole bunch of articles about them making it, but have they actually used it yet?
It was used. I don't know if it's been used in combat, but I've definitely seen, and certainly that's where the Jewish space lasers conspiracy theory comes from, is the fact that microwave beam exists. It looks like it's primarily utilized for shooting missiles or rockets out of the sky. And since we're not exactly under threat of that, it's not been a technology that's been particularly useful so far. But they have used the sound beam in the protests that happened this summer, which is a somewhat similar technology of using, high pressure sound waves, sort of less than lethally.
So I want to also answer John. Lightning gun sounds worthless. Yeah, one of the problems they have with it is if there's a car too close to where you're aiming, the lightning ends up going to the car. So it's like almost impossible to aim, because if there's something that's metal, that it ends up. Yeah.
I'm surprised the car would do it because the tire should insulate it.
I know what I was told. That's all I know. I didn't work on it, but yeah.
That's what it would head towards.
You could probably cut a third of the military budget out entirely, and not reduce one tank, one aircraft, one useful piece of equipment, because there's so much wasted on bullshit.
Yep.
This conversation brings a question to my mind, which is purely hypothetical, but might make for an interesting discussion. So 30 years ago, as we all know, the Soviet Union fell apart, and the U.S. intelligence services and probably others around the world spent the 90s gobbling up all these nuclear weapons that generals and others in the Soviet structure had access to, and we were buying up all the weapons so that they wouldn't fall into the hands of terrorists. Right? We're buying up nuclear weapons like crazy. If the fabric of American culture breaks down because of some kind of civil failure, election chaos, military coup, or citizens coup, whatever the hell happens, if anything like that happens, what's going to happen to all these cool weapons you guys are talking about?
Like the ones that aren't being used?
What's going to happen with them? Because the controls will disappear.
Well, probably the same thing that'll happen to nuclear weapons. They can't have no delivery mechanism for them.
Yeah.
They'll sit useless until they expire under parts that cease to work because they haven't been kept, I guess.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, one thing that I was looking at this the other day, like the Russian, people are worried, about the Russians. Like, I mean, obviously the Russians are an issue in, against their neighbors. But I mean, I've actually had people say, "Oh, Russia could invade us." I'm like, their entire navy is, I'm like, again, not counting corvettes, like ships that are designed to operate near their coasts, but their ocean-going navy is 29 surface ships and an equivalent number of submarines. That's it.
Doesn't seem like very many.
It's not. They got one aircraft carrier, like 5 cruisers and a bunch of frigates.
Huh.
It's basically one task force and a few picket ships. It's like and actually what's more troubling is the Chinese Navy. But even there, the Chinese Navy is dwarfed by our Navy.
Only for now.
The Soviet Union was far more dangerous than Russia, especially with their doomsday setup. So I don't know if anybody heard about that, but they had this whole thing set up where if they were like invaded and they were losing, they had computer systems that would automatically launch every nuclear missile they had. They were like, if we're going down, the whole world is going down with us.
Well, it kind of gives you a vested interest in not destroying them if you realize that destroying them is also destroying yourself. So,
Yeah, but that wasn't known until after the Soviet Union collapsed. That was like that was a secret, which tells me they had every intention of using it.
Oh well, to be honest with you, I wouldn't doubt that we had the same protocol. Right? Like, hey, if we were going down, we were going to maybe obviously we weren't necessarily with our allies, but we definitely would have shot at all of our potential enemies.
I think the doctrine of mutually assured destruction, I'm horrified to admit, has probably saved my life because, I actually can't believe that nuclear weapons have been around for 76 years or whatever it is, and have only been used in warfare in Japan. And they've been available the whole time. And over those 75 years or whatever, 85 years, whatever it is, nuclear weapons have gotten smaller, and now there's such a thing as battlefield nuclear weapons, which was not a thing in the 40s, 50s, or 60s.
I keep saying when we talk about gun laws and the gun rights activists, I always say, hey, I mean, if you want to own any weapon you want, I want a Davy Crockett. And a Davy Crockett is a tactical nuke. It fits on the back of a pickup truck.
Actually, one correction forgot that funk there. The first battle, at least the U.S. first battlefield nuke, was the Honest John missile system, which came out in 1953.
I just want to also correct myself in the sense that the fact that we haven't used explosive nuclear weapons in battlefields does not negate the reality of depleted uranium weapons, which we've used all across Iraq and Afghanistan and elsewhere, especially Iraq and Afghanistan, though. Oh
yeah, and obviously with health consequences for the soldiers using it.
Sure.
And any surviving victims as well.
I just want to say about Raven. You said the Soviet Union was way more dangerous than Russia is, and like in terms of being blown to smithereens, you're probably right. But I think they have their teeth in the neck of our society as regards cultural manipulation, and I don't really know how to disentangle that.
Well, that's
they've got a lot of. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, but we've allowed that, though. I mean, that's our fault. Like that, they are dangerous from that perspective. They absolutely are. But that's only because we allow them to continue to be. There's no reason that, as a country, there's no reason we can't do something about it. We have chosen not to.
Well, because we are messed up society, and so they're playing on our own internal problems. So basically, we are the source of our own vulnerability. So it's hard to stop them because you have to make the vulnerability go away, right? And so we don't address those things, and so and that's why one of the reasons why our society is so fractured is we already had these, and I said before many times that I felt like what Bin Laden won. There were some of these things, a lot of these things were already under the surface for a long time, but they were under the surface, and 9/11 kind of ripped open, Pandora's box, and brought those fears and everything to the forefront in a way that, like, most of us here will remember Cold War times, and I don't ever remember things being our society as a whole being as scared and reactive as we are now back in the 70s and 80s when the Soviets actually could have, wiped us out.
We didn't have the internet back then.
Yeah, and I mean, God forbid you tell any right winger that they're scared. When they obviously are. They're afraid of fucking everything, right? They're afraid of everything. But it's the left of the snowflakes. But the right, they're afraid of gay people. They're afraid of brown people. They're afraid of viruses. They're afraid of masks. They're afraid of vaccines. They're afraid of fucking. But yeah, go ahead. You tell them that though.
Oh yeah, they are the most timid and frightened people I've ever seen in my life. I mean, they're the same ones like War on Starbucks has an all red cup and doesn't have a Christmas design on it. And mind you, red is still a Christmas color. But oh no, they're attacking Christmas. Like, Jesus Christ. What the fuck is wrong with you people? And that's why they need their guns, because they're fucking petrified. And you think about it, Obama's, he was right when he said these people, they get scared and they cling to their guns and their Bibles, and they got angry at him. But what did they do? They went out and bought tons of guns and Bibles.
Jesus saves.
I hazard to think what it would have been like to have Facebook and Twitter during the Cold War. I think we very likely could have seen society on exactly this kind of brink back then, because I've said before, I've kind of come to the conclusion social media is a more dangerous invention of humankind than nuclear weapons ever were. We're much less likely to find common ground, at least with this particular algorithm-driven landscape. I don't see us really fixing this until we do something about the way we all communicate.
Well, see, to your point, Jack, and again, this goes to kind of what I've said for a long time. A lot of people felt that social media is creating bubbles, but it's not. We all always had bubbles. There were certain topics that were off limits. Now, because you see on your feed, you see everything that your friends post. And so there are people that I was friends with for a long time because we played games. Their politics were different than mine, but we didn't go down that route. But then when you start seeing the heinous shit that they post every fucking day, and then it's like, I can't associate with this person anymore because I'm constantly reminded that they believe things that I find morally repugnant. And so it's like, and I've had people say to me, well, you'll end a friendship, over a simple disagreement. I said, no, not a simple disagreement. A simple disagreement is what should taxes be, or how much should we spend on infrastructure?
Does pineapple belong on pizza?
Right. those are
It does.
but it's not. But not like whether Raven should be, should be respected and under the law and her identity recognized and not be in fear of violence. That's a deal breaker for me.
Last week, I went and I got my booster for COVID, and the girl at the pharmacy called me sir. Do I look like a sir?
No.
Kazoom, what were you going to say?
Well, I was just going to say that bubbles and echo chambers and such they've become much more prevalent since we've had social media. I mean, they've become much more powerful. Things that people normally wouldn't have even gone down very much. They might have just had a curiosity about. Now they have an entire bubble of society, of not society, but of I don't know, subcultures that we can go into now that we couldn't before. So I don't think we should discount the social bubbles that have been created out of social media. Then I think you were lessening the effect of this a little bit much, as far as I'm concerned.
That's not all bad either, though, Kazoo.
Yeah, but if cells can find support groups, we're all fucked.
There's almost any interest that you have now, you can find a bubble for somewhere online. And previous to the internet, we didn't have that. You'd have to do searching. You'd have to. It would take a lot. And so I just want to push that the amount that social media has allowed us to be more tribal. I hope you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't think we're more tribal. I mean, we've always been this tribal, but the fact that you can see what the other tribe is saying in such a moment to moment way causes a lot more it's pretty easy for me as somebody who's not an evangelical Christian, for instance. I don't really care what a bunch of people are saying in church, even if it's pretty hateful. It doesn't really bother me. But if it's then on my feed, and anybody who doesn't believe
my neighbor, right? My neighbor, every time he cuts the grass, wherever we talk, right? I have no idea what he thinks about me, right? Since I've lived here since before I was transitioning, and I've always known him, and I talk to him every time I see him. We talk. I have no idea what he thinks about me, but if I had access to what was going on in his living room after we spoke, and he went in the house and he says, that fucking tranny bitch, talking to me again, I might then have a different attitude towards him.
Right, so that's the thing.
Yeah, that's what it's done. It's given us.
So Jack he's on the same path as me, I think, because the idea is that it's not that we're creating more bubbles; it's that the bubbles bump into each other more. So before, if you like Jack did, okay, so just say you belong to a church, you believe a lot of right-wing hateful shit. Well, you'd go to church and you hear that, or people would talk about it amongst themselves. Well, if they were hanging out with you and me, they wouldn't say that shit. Well, now, if they post it on Facebook, we see that. So,
Yeah, I agree that that's happening, but I also have to accentuate that there are interests that we have that someone can have now that they'd never even know that anyone else had those interests before. In the past, you'd never be able to connect with people that had those same interests. But now that we have all these options available online, we can connect with people who have the most minute of interests that we didn't before, and I agree that those interests can now be shown to the public who doesn't have interest in those things, and so I mean, everything that you said was right, but I also think that the internet has allowed us to focus on our interests more than we ever were before.
Well, we live in a world where cannibalistic Pikachu fans can find each other.
I'm sure it's really good for furries.
And I mean, cannibalistic Pikachu fans can find each other and meet for lunch.
I'll just say that, you know, the internet was pretty great when it was just BBSs and like forums, because, you know, if you saw a hateful comment, it was from 6 months ago from some anonymized name. Didn't really matter. But like, as Raven was saying, if you hear what your neighbor's thoughts about you are in the privacy of their own living room cast out on the internet, like, it just creates a completely different set of relationships. It's just, and it's something that we're not going to be able to get past if we are constantly given reasons to hate each other, not just for their opinions, but just the sense that that person is genuinely evil. You know, like
well, I think also another thing it does is people can go their whole lives in a situation, or like going to the church that is preaching the evil philosophy, right? And never truly realize that the philosophy of this church is as evil as it is, because they don't live in a world where that philosophy comes into action, if you will. It doesn't ever meet a scenario wherein now we must enact the living principle of whatever we are espousing.
When can we use the guns?
What?
When can we use the guns?
And so I think of it like the place we're at now. It's much easier for people to see, like you guys were saying, like the inside. It's much easier though for when it's like this church has this philosophy over here, but it causes people to have this knee-jerk reaction because they're like, well, I go to that church every Sunday and those people have only ever been nice to me in real life. But that's because they've never encountered anything that would actually make the bad tenets of what their church or their place or whatever is espousing come to light. So all they know is this good thing, right? And then somebody is just out there attacking it and they can't really understand why. I think that that's kind of a, I don't know. I guess to me that's sort of a problem.
It's real.
What?
It's real. It's real. Look at the link. It's real. Cannibalistic Pikachu fans. Oh my god. It's a community.
Do you mean, Raven, do you mean that you just
cannibal.
look it up and it turns out there's really stuff like that out there? You just
Not
that came off the
really.
top of your head?
Yeah, I thought I was making it up.
It's all out there. It's
Which
all
one of you guys Googled that?
Well, you guys familiar with the comedian Patton Oswalt?
Say again?
Yes.
Patton Oswalt. He was on.
played Remy the Rat in Ratatouille.
Yeah, he was on King of Queens. He was like the neighbor. So anyway, so I've known him for a long time, and anyway, he's a real funny guy. One of his specials, he said that, you know, the funny thing about porn is that, you know, whatever is your weirdest, deepest, darkest, dankest, scariest fantasy that you have, that it's so out there in your mind that you even judge yourself for even having it, there's a magazine devoted to just that. You know?
That's summarizing all of the internet.
Isn't it rule 42 though? Right? I mean, if you can think of it, there's porn of it.
Well,
That's 34.
Well,
Oh, it's 34? 34.
Yeah, I was hanging with some friends. They were here at my house, and someone made a joke about tentacle porn. We didn't know that it's a huge branch of porn. And we were like, and someone's like, I think that's a thing. And we want to look it up. Like, holy fuck, there's like thousands of websites devoted to tentacle porn. Like, damn, I was just making
that was a thing when I was like 20. How did you not know that was a thing?
I didn't know a lot of things, apparently.
As a 90s anime fan, I ran into Urotsukidoji pretty early.
So Shadow, look up a geoduck.
I've never.
You mean a gooey duck?
So that's why I didn't know.
Yeah. Look up that. It's spelt like that, but duck. Go ahead, Shadow. Look that up. You can eat that if you want.
Oh,
I mean,
I've never had one, but I've seen them before. They're wild looking.
Yeah, gooey duck.
Yeah.
they're gross looking. I hate them.
Looks like a penis.
Looks like a horse's penis.
It does look like a penis. It's a mollusk. It's a type of clam.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny that the clam looks like a penis.
Well
What
done.
are those?
Well done.
Gang,
What do you got there,
gang,
Paul?
gang, gooey, 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 wash, wash. Okay, never mind.
Trying to find Geoduck
It's not Geo. It's Gooey.
here somewhere.
Yeah, it's
Oh my
weird. It's
God.
spelled Geo, but it's pronounced gooey.
I was just going to say that makes. Yeah, there you go, Shadow.
Sister Danger.
What?
Got Psyduck and Gold Duck.
Sister Danger, did you hear my joke about gaslighting?
That's the joke, I think.
I'm pretty sure it is.
Yes, you did.
I suppose that means yes, I did.
Oh man, that's funny.
Geoduck.
No, a better delivery of that. Sorry to do this. Is you got to go. You laughed at my joke about gaslighting.
What? That's not funny.
It is funny because the whole point of a joke is to laugh. So it's basically giving you a hard time for laughing at the joke you made about gaslighting.
I know. I get it.
I think it's funny.
It is funny. I mean, I wasn't being serious when I said that's not funny.
Oh,
I don't.
I'm sorry.
I don't.
You got me.
And yes,
Sorry.
Shadow is going to kill you. I was looking through my Pokemon cards for. I don't have the names of the Pokemon memorized in my head. There's like 151 Pokemon. So Geoduck sounded like a real Pokemon name to me. So I went and to have a look, but no.
Yeah, that's something I was really surprised when it was a Pokemon Go was a thing about with people like my own age. Like, really? I was kind of surprised.
Yeah, I was about to ask for that because I very specifically remember that I was just a little too old to be into Pokemon.
Yeah.
Like when it came out, it was definitely the thing that, you know, kids in middle school were into when I was late in high school. So it was like, how are you into Pokemon?
Hang on a second. I'll show you. Hang on. Let me see here. Does it go this one? Is that the one? No, it's this one.
Yeah. I mean, the animated series came out in '97. I was like well past college at that point.
See, so
I've
I've
got
got like all of them.
Are you just flexing because you're a millionaire now?
No, he's
No.
That's his retirement fund.
I want to like get rid of these, but I'm not enough of a research type person. I can't get the screen to go back. I'm not enough of a research type person to look up 200 fucking cards. And
Well, I have a friend who owns a shop that sells things like that, like literally a card and gaming shop. It's got a warehouse with like over 2 million different cards in it. If you want me to ask him to take a look at your cards.
Hey, Joe, can you equalize this all again? Because mine's not working.
Sure.
There we go.
There we go. That's the one. Okay, great. For some reason, it wasn't happening. Anyway, no, my kids were exactly the target age, Jack, when those things came out. I started buying those cards in 1999, and they literally have been in these plastic sleeves ever since they came out of the packet. They've never been, most of these cards anyway, have never been played with, or they've been in these
So
plastic.
that wasn't a joke. That's actually your retirement fund.
Okay, what happened was we amassed all the cards, and we have a whole bunch of extras. Each of my kids had their own set. And so I'm like, well, I don't actually have that far to go to get a third set. So I went ahead and finished the third set. And my kids, of course, well, my son had his Pokemon cards stolen by a bully, which was really awful. But my daughter just gave hers away because she didn't want them anymore. So I've got these Pokemon cards now that have just been sitting in a drawer for like 20 years. Mostly virtually untouched by human hands. And Sister Danger, you mentioned you have a friend who had a shop. There's such a shop like that here in Boulder. And I went to take my cards down a couple of weeks ago. And I said, you know, would you appraise these for me or tell me how I can find out how much they're worth? and I'll figure it out myself, and then come down and, you know, see if you want to make me an offer that I agree with. And he's like, well, you'd have to leave them here with me because I'd have to go over each card. And there's like 200 fucking cards there. And he's like, you'd have to leave them here with me. And he says, but he takes one out and does an example, and it's fucking pristine, right? It's like foil Nidoking or something like that. It's pristine. And he's like, well, this card looks heavily played and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, dude, if that's what your appraisal is going to be like, I'm walking. You know what I mean? That card was literally perfect. And he's trying to pass it off as heavily played because that way it won't be worth as much. And so I want to find out how I can get these cards appraised by someone who's not going to try to rip me off for it.
I mean, it's the proper. There are grading agencies.
Well, this is like somebody that I've known for a really, really long time. I've worked with him, and I mean, like, not anyway, whatever. Very cool guy. I would trust him to at least point you in the right direction, or to another trustworthy person. You know, if he couldn't do it himself, but.
Well, I mean, this guy at the shop in Boulder wanted me to leave my cards in his fucking shop. I mean, do you think I came down on the last drop of rain or something? I'm not that fucking stupid.
I mean, the problem with even the most ethical dealer, they're probably not going to give you more than 25% of what they're worth because they want to make a profit.
I don't dispute that they want to make a profit, but so do I. I'm not selling the cards for their
your best bet is to sell them at auction.
And I'm very curious to find out your opinions, everybody, because do you think that it would be better to try to sell them as a lot? Because they're a whole complete or to sell
there's literally nothing that is better sold as a lot. Like I can't think of anything, including a car. Like, you want to make a lot of money on your car, take it apart and sell it as a piece. You know,
I can think of an example. It's things that I've bought many times through eBay is buying used VHS tapes that are recorded from television, and they have to be sold as blank because they're not legally able to sell them as stuff that's recorded, right? So I've bought stuff in lots that way, and I've gotten pretty good results, and that's really the only way you can do that and have good results. So that's an exception.
I'll amend this and say that buying as a lot is always a benefit for the consumer. It's never a benefit for the seller.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing. And the thing is, and actually, you know, Jack mentioned eBay. Unless they're graded, don't bother selling on eBay, because what ends up happening is whatever grade you'd give them, the buyers are going to count it down 2 grades, even if it's so. Even if you got something that's perfect gem mint, because they can't see it, touch it, hold it, even if you got pictures. So your best bet is an actual in-person auction once they start having them again, because that's when you'll actually get the most. And the thing is, you have to go to the right auctions, obviously, too. You got to go to ones that are focused on those type of things. Because like I said, now if you have graded stuff, eBay is great, because then everybody knows, okay, it's a this grade, that grade, whatever, and there's actually books put out that actually tell you, like, in a given grade what it's worth, and so people will generally buy with confidence, and the prices will change. I mean, the books are a guideline; they're kind of telling you what they are selling at, not really what it's worth, but what the current going rate. But then that'll change based on supply and demand things. Things go into vogue, out of vogue. But I mean, so I used to be heavily into baseball cards years ago, and when I got out of it, and then when I came back and I was interested, and I started realizing, like, if it's not graded, you just get even in eBay you get raped. But people in-person auctions don't have the same bias.
I love going to in-person auctions. Quite frankly, if I had nothing better to do, it would be my favorite hobby.
One thing that got me with baseball cards, like when I was young and I started collecting baseball cards when I was like 8, and when I first started going to auctions and things and going to baseball cards, memorabilia stores that sold baseball cards, generally speaking, at the time, if you had something in basically whatever condition it was, the dealers would give you 50% of book value. So it's like, hey, they're basically getting 100% markup. Pretty good, right? And then as the market started to slip, in part because of overproduction, then they started dropping it to 40%, then 30, and 25. But I remember going to this one when it first dropped to like 35, 40%. And I went in and I had my cards, and I was kind of financially strapped, and I was trying to sell off some of my better cards. And I go in, and the guy looks at it, and he answers it, and then so I already know at this point I'm not going to get 50%. So we're dicking around, and I basically give him a number that's 40%. He's like, "That's 40%!" Like I was like robbing from his children or something. And so I said, "All right," and I pick up the cards and I go, and he's like, "Where you go?" And I'm like, "These are my cards, asshole." He's like, "Well," he's like, "Well, I want to buy them." I said, "No, you want to give me 30%, and I'm not taking 30%." I said, "I would rather burn them in front of you in the corner, on the stoop of your shop, than sell you these fucking cards for 30%."
Wow.
He literally acted like I was stealing the cards out of the shop that were mine, that he hadn't given me any money for.
Wow. I think it's interesting how a tiny slip of cardboard can be worth $250,000. You know what I mean? It just blows my mind that, but it's all about rarity and stuff, isn't it? And that's what it's about. And if nothing's worth more than someone's willing to pay for it. And conversely, something is worth as much as someone's willing to pay for it. So
what's really funny is when my wife, she doesn't watch him so much anymore, but she used to watch a lot of the shows where it's like Cash in the Attic and things like that, where people find shit in their house and they go sell it at auction. And or Antiques Roadshow was another one. So she came to the conclusion, like, if she sees something and it's really ugly, she's like, "Oh, that's going to be valuable." And she's almost always right, because that's the rarity. Like, no one collected that because it was ugly as shit. So there's like 10 pieces left on the planet. So if you want that ugly piece of shit, and you have a lot of money, you'll pay for it.
Yeah, that totally explains NFTs. I have never seen anything uglier than some of the higher end NFTs. Like, it just makes me question the taste of rich people more than I already do.
Okay, so last summer I saw a tweet go by about this guy. I think he's a boxer, and he just bought a watch that cost $1 million, and he was showing it off in the store at the time. And at the time, I remember tweeting that I think that's obscene, because if you've got $1 million piece of jewelry, you're basically saying, "I don't give a fuck how poor you are." Well, last week, some other, I think, sports personality bought a $5.5 million watch. And how is a 5.5? How can you even? It's not even attractive to look at. And I just don't understand why. I mean, how can you even leave your house with $5.5 million around your wrist?
That's because like nobody knows it. Nobody knows you have $5.5 million on your wrist.
Yeah, well, so one of the things with that mentioned the NFT, I mean, I saw somebody, I don't remember who it was, they were giving away free NFTs. I'm like, well, then just put up a GIF and say it's okay to download this shit. I mean, that's all it fucking is. It was like, there's an NFT image. Like, okay, so all right, so you're giving away these for free, and there's only going to be a certain number of them in circulation, and that's it. Okay.
Sorry, with Sister Danger, when your mic's not muted, it comes over. There's all this distortion coming over, at least on me.
Yeah. You're muted, Amy.
Sorry, there's like nothing happening in our house, so I don't know what that would be.
It's fine when you're speaking.
Oh, I'm gonna swap computers though really fast, because I've been in the art room this whole time working on an order, and I'm really hot now, so I'm gonna swap computers. I'll be right back.
Yeah, I think it's just echo. I think it's because there's a delay, and when you hear I think it's just echo.
Hello, 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 hello. Echo, echo, echo. Now pinch hitting for Pedro Borbon, Manny Mota.
I only vaguely recognize that. I'm not sure from where.
Do anybody else? Airplane.
Oh. Okay.
Oh.
One of the reasons why the art for NFTs is so horrible is because they use computer-generated graphics to change one little thing about each of the things. So they'll have different fields, like what hat are they wearing, what eye patch are they wearing, glasses or whatnot, and what their facial hair is. And they just use this generator to create 50,000 different faces of a certain animal, you know? penguins with
the lazy lions or the penguins or the what was it, the apes, bored apes. I think what's hilarious about it is that they are doing exactly what killed the 90s comic book market when they were just flooding things with variant covers and things that looked nearly identical. You could buy 7 different issues of the most recent Spider-Man with a foil cover and, whatever different variants. And ultimately, it doesn't matter if each one is sort of unique in some way. If you're putting tons of them out there, then it has no value.
Well, and that was the problem. I actually somebody mentioned Propter Hawk mentioning having the top sets 81 and 92. Well, in 87 and 88 somehow because baseball cards started getting really big in the mainstream, and so Topps over and the others too overproduced those 2 years, and the Don Russ and the other ones are okay, but the top sets those 2 years are virtually worthless. You can actually buy, it's about lots, you can actually buy sets including which has all the cards cheaper than you can buy some of the rare cards. That's how fucking undervalued that set or low value that set is, because which has those cards that are valuable, and so the set is worth less than the sum of its parts.
I do. There was one good thing that came out of that, which is Valiant Comics, which was a short-lived comic company that was started by Jim Shooter, who used to be the lead editor at Marvel Comics. He started Valiant Comics in, I think, the early 90s or the late 80s, and it was actually possible to collect every single issue that company ever published, which they fell apart right and as the 90s comic book industry kind of collapsed. But the benefit of it was that you could go to a comic book shop and for 25 cents each, you could buy everything that Valiant ever published, which I did. And I'll tell you that it was good frickin' storytelling. They had great comics. And, maybe one of the minor benefits is that people today can still collect everything Valiant Comics ever published and get some really good storytelling.
Nice. Yeah, it's funny because I love the comic movies for the most part, although I don't like most of what DC's put out in recent years. But I've never been a huge comic person. I had some enough that I knew who everyone was, but so it's kind of funny that I got really into the comic movies and just felt so invested in them because I was never really invested in the comics. I think for me, it was really more the cartoons. You had the Super Friends on Saturday, and then every day you had Spider-Man and
Justice,
Iron Man, and the Hulk, and all that.
Yeah, I was going to say I saw the Eternals today.
Me too.
Yeah, and so it's not just Eternals; it's also the rest of the MCU universe and the X-Men and everything else like that. I'm kind of glad I never read the comic books because I can watch the movies and enjoy them or not enjoy them, as the case might be in some cases. But I could just enjoy them as a movie, and I don't have to be comparing it to what I already know, and so forth. I thought the Eternals today, I would give it a strong 5 and a possible 6. And I think if I knew the comic books, I probably would have given it a 2 or a 3. I don't really know. But bottom line is, for me, the movie kind of suffered from a bad script. There's nothing that can save a weak script. All the special effects and great acting in the world can't save a weak script. So.
Hey, I'm just curious, and I'm slightly changing the subject, but Dune. Have any of you read Dune?
Yes.
Yeah,
and
we talked about it at the top of the show.
And would in the book, did they ever go into how the regular people lived? How the government affected the way that the regular people lived, or do they never go into that? Is it kind of the same as the newest movie? Do they never really mention that? And the focus is mainly on the protagonist.
They definitely go in on the Fremen, for sure in the book. You find out a lot about the Fremen's whole culture, and it's quite violent and
Well,
rooted.
and the people of Caladan, the fisher folk. I mean, in the book, there's quite a long section in the early portion just about some of the, because Caladan is a very sort of rural fishing economy for the most part, and so most of the people, there's like a little section about Duke Atreides, or maybe it was Leto's father who went out on the fishing vessels with the people. There was this thing about because we see Duke Leto go to the sand crawlers. That sequence in the book relates it to Duke Leto going out to the fishing vessels on his home planet, and of course, in the later books, in books mainly like 3 and 4, you start really seeing the effect of Duke Leto, or well, I don't want to spoil anything, but the effects of the plot on the all the planets in the universe, and we get some sense of what the world is like. But I think the thing that a lot of people miss about Dune is Dune isn't a story that is meant to tell you that a neo-feudalist society in the far future is a good thing.
Oh, hell no. Hell no. No, it's violent as hell. And when Paul Atreides becomes who he becomes, he's a scourge of the galaxy. So
that's a big spoiler.
Oh, speaking of this, you just made me think of something I wanted to say earlier, Jack. So with the way you're dressed, with the top you have on and that hat, it's like you look like the proletariat ready to smash the capitalists.
It's true. All I need is like a red hammer and sickle on my hat.
I used to wear a Chinese Communist Party hat. I thought it was very edgy at the time. Little red star.
I've never had anything with iconography on it. I don't subscribe to any particular political ideology in that way. Certainly not enough to wear a symbol of it. But I did used to really love in the winter. I had one of those big sort of Russian hats that keeps your ears really warm, and I used to call it my my Cossack hat. But that's about as close as I ever got.
Mm.
Yeah, I've never been one. I don't like wearing logos of any type, especially not corporate logos. But yeah, so I don't like any of that, and I don't get bumper stickers. And
what about bands? Would you wear?
I think this used to have a logo and it got torn off or something early.
I did have band shirts, but I only ever wore them to concerts.
Okay, how about something of how about
oh, go ahead.
How about past products like Atari or something like that, something that represents something of the past?
No, even though I loved Atari back in the day, no, I've never worn an Atari merch either contemporaneously or ironically or nostalgically.
I think I would like to have an Atari T-shirt.
Yeah.
It's just like a retro. I'd wear that. I'd wear the shit out of that.
I would definitely wear fake products. I haven't, but it'd be cool to have a Weyland-Yutani shirt or something from just there's certain things the Tyrell Corporation or something like that just from science fiction.
I saw somebody wearing a Psycor pin from Babylon 5.
Oh, I'd love that. So I wear band shirts from the past, but only because I've had them since they were still. I mean, this Bauhaus shirt. I've had this since forever. I think I moved to Britain and back with that shirt. And this shirt is from the 1994 World Cup in Chicago. I have when I was a scaffolder and everything. It's taking so much beating, but I love it. What's that?
One time I went to see is it Peter Murphy who is the lead singer of Bauhaus?
Peter Murphy sings for Bauhaus. Is that what you said? She's frozen.
Hey,
You're frozen.
That Funk, do you want to respond to Vegas in the comments? Talked about the Hot Topic store, which, you know, obviously I'm super supportive of this. I think that this is a great thing. I think just knowing how retail works, some of these shops are, you know, raking in tremendous amounts of money. Oh, you're back.
Oh.
You're not back.
Kind of, maybe no.
Well, also, and every time I see or hear Hot Topic, it always makes me think of that episode of South Park where they burned down the Hot Topic.
I can't see Hot Topic without thinking it being said in the Hot Pocket thing. Hot Topic. Okay, sorry.
the Jim Gaffigan voice.
Yeah. Hot Pocket. Caliente Pocket. What's really funny about Hot Pockets, sorry to diverge, but when before they passed a law that things advertised as light or lean actually had to have less fat and calories than previous, Hot Pockets originally there was a box. The serving size was you would get a box and there was 2 Hot Pockets in it, and the serving size was 2. And the first lean pockets were 1 pocket, and the serving size was 1, and it was literally the exact same fucking thing. So all the nutritional information was literally half what was on the Hot Pocket. And it's like, no. Just saying eat a smaller portion is not making it lean. You actually have to take fat and sugar out of the shit to make it count.
I just want to ask Sister Danger real quick. Sister Danger, your microphone cut out and you froze for a while. What were you saying about Bauhaus?
I think I'm gonna restart my computer.
Yeah, you look very choppy.
Yeah, very pixelated. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh-oh. Okay.
No Bauhaus questions for you.
Okay, I guess I'll never know.
I was wondering if she was going to start talking about the Bauhaus art movement, which the
Right.
band got its name from.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of curious about as well. So I think I might have been confusing something there. So I guess I'll never know.
Well, she'll probably be back shortly. So probably
Really?
about
It's
about
not
2
important enough
minutes.
for me to remember next week. So yeah.
I was more of a Ministry fan than Bauhaus.
I have a Nirvana shirt and I have a Motley Crue shirt, and that's pretty much it as far as band shirts. But like when I was a kid, I had tons and tons.
I just realized I do have a communist star on a piece of clothing because I have a Coup shirt by the band The Coup, which is, you know, Oakland hometown band. Highly recommend The Coup. If anybody hasn't heard them, look up the song "We Got the Guillotine." It's a bop.
I also have 3 or 4 denim jackets that I painted while I was in high school that has band names on it, but it's actually my own artwork though. It's copies of their artwork, but you know what I mean. I painted it myself. That I have.
Man, I have this memory of I had this Alice in Chains shirt that I'd wear all the time, and at some point someone came up and asked me about, what do you think of the new lead singer, and all I knew of Alice in Chains was their old stuff. You know, after they changed singers, I stopped paying attention to them, and so I ended up saying something as stupid as, I just got the shirt because I thought it was cool or something. And it's just one of those stupid things that you those memories you go, oh God.
Well, I just got it because I like the picture.
But no, I did like Alice in Chains, but wait, like I said, once they lost the singer, the original singer, I was just lost interest. So.
Well, see, funny thing is, I was when they their first album with the new the William came out. I was like so on it, but actually the album Rainier Fog is actually now has 4 of my favorite Alice in Chains songs of all time. So it's worth looking at again. So like Black Gives Way to Blue is a decent album, but Rainier Fog's better.
Delete that comment. Yeah, thank you.
Wait,
Fuck
delete
Joe's
what
feelings
comment?
because I chose violence this morning. There is a band that deserves to have their T-shirts purchased and not their music listened to, and it is Cannibal Corpse.
I've heard the name. I'm aware of them, but I don't really know their music.
Well,
I remember there was some kind of controversy about them.
their T-shirts were bloody and awesome, but to listen to them was just like a wall of Cookie Monster.
Oh, okay. So it's
weird.
like Screamo or something.
It won't let me
Beyond that, if Cookie Monster was gargling gravel.
It won't let me delete the comment, Paul. It only let me report or block.
Yeah, oops. I didn't mean to do that. I thought I copied something else. So I hope nobody. It's too late now, right?
well, the thing is, we don't have to let them in, and we can always kick them out if they.
Well, that's right. Yeah, sure. Play anyway. So I wanted to change the subject slightly because this a minute ago Jack mentioned the word guillotine, and I've heard this word quite frequently just over the past week or so, and it's
made a comeback.
Well, it's interesting, the whole idea, but I wanted to make a point as well, because we've never really talked that much. I mean, we talked a little bit once in a while about capital punishment, and I'm personally am against capital punishment under all circumstances. But having said that, the fact that it still exists in America means that it ought to be done as humanely as possible. And I want to ask in all sincerity, I'm not being flippant, why not bring back the guillotine? It's instantaneous, man. There's no dirty needle thing or like it's taking you 20 minutes to die. Do you know what I mean? There's none of that stuff. What's up?
Well, I mean, I think the best way to kill someone in that regard is to give them an overdose on some sort of downer. Do something where they feel so elated, they feel extremely elated, and then eventually they die out of the things they feel elated over, and they're done. I think that would be the most humane way of killing someone.
Actually, to me, nitrogen asphyxia, because you're not going to be sucking. I mean, basically, we're in 70% nitrogen, so 79% nitrogen. Excuse me. So having 100%, basically you're going to pass out fairly quickly, and you're not going to be in any pain whatsoever.
I just want to say to Vegas in the comments section, he says capital punishment might be legal, but it's been on the decline for a very long time over most of the United States. True and not true. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when capital punishment was technically deemed illegal for about 8 or 9 years during the 70s. And then if I recall correctly, there was a case here in Colorado where some guy who was convicted of murder said, no, I don't want to appeal. Kill me now. And that sort of restarted executions in America after a nearly 10-year-long moratorium, because the Supreme Court, I'm not sure if it was the late 60s or early 70s, deemed death row to be cruel and unusual punishment.
I personally think that when it comes to capital punishment, I think that if someone has committed a crime that's so heinous that that we would normally think of killing them, we should give that person the choice of whether they want to die or not.
Yeah, I agree with that.
To me, that would be the method
for prisoners who have life sentences, and at some point, if they want to go, you know what, I don't want to stay here for the next 30 years. I'm ready to check out now. You should let them do that,
and it should be immediate.
But that's not capital punishment. That's euthanasia. It's completely different comment.
Yes.
Yeah, as Vegas had said, I just went and looked up the numbers. So in 2015, Texas had 13, Missouri 6, Georgia 5, Florida 2, Virginia 1. 2021 so far, the U.S. government, so federal level, three by Texas and 1 by Missouri. Last year was actually 10 on the federal level, 3 in Texas, 1 in Missouri, 1 in Georgia, 1 in Alabama, 1 in Tennessee. So that's
just federal.
Yeah. So there was 18 executions last year. So it is lower than it was in 2015. 2015 there's 24, 26, 27 in 2015, 2018, 13, 25. So it's really only gotten down the last couple of years.
But Joe, the purpose of mentioning that it's been on the decline means that politically we should ignore it now.
Jack, post it in the private chat and I'll throw it up on screen.
Yeah, I years ago I was in favor of it, and I guess I'll say this: some people argue that the state doesn't have the right. I disagree. I disagree that that state doesn't have the right. However, because you can't, it's something that it's a sanction that you can't tap back. If you make a mistake and you convict the wrong person, there's nothing you can, you can't help the person, that you've killed. Now you can't let them out of jail and compensate them and give them a big pile of cash for incarcerating them for a time they shouldn't have been incarcerated. They're gone. And so I don't believe in an afterlife. So to me, taking someone's life unjustly is one of the worst things you can do to them. Probably not the worst thing you can do to them. So I'd say that. So I came to the conclusion that no. Plus the fact that, if someone's not swayed by that argument, the fact that we also know that it is used, there's bias in the system as to who gets the sentence, who actually gets executed, and how long it takes, and all that. So there's too many problems with it. So I'm like, from a theoretical perspective, yes, the state has the right to do it, but no, the state should never do it because there's just no compelling reason to do it.
If I could dissent from what you guys have been saying about like putting a fast lane in for those who want their
I
death
used to be
to
a
happen
capital
quicker,
punishment person, but
people behind bars deserve health care.
my position.
Mental health is part of health care. And what we would provide as a suicidal person on the outside, we should provide on the inside as well. There is some mental health problem that they have that has made them try to commit suicide. We should give them the same care that we give other people.
I agree that we should give people mental health care who are suicidal, although there are rational reasons that, so I would say not every desired suicide is a result of bad mental health. I mean, there was a woman a couple of years ago that there was a big deal about it, that she had some terminal illness. She was going to die anyway in agony and pain. And she said, hey, I'm going to have a big party with my friends around and then I'm going to check out. And I'm like, yeah, fucking A.
Yeah, I'm against any death penalty by the state. I think I'm very in support of the meme of the guillotine. I think it's good to make people in power at least consider the fact that they aren't totally immune to all forms of justice. But I support it as a meme. I like the idea of taking cardboard guillotines to protests as a reminder. But I don't think that there's any way to make a legitimate I can't think of a legitimate argument for why the state should be in the business of killing people.
I agree.
Even, in the best possible circumstance, it's still something that strikes me as there's too much gray area there.
Well, the function of a government is to protect the safety of its citizens. It's one of its main functions. And so it seems contrary to the purpose of government to kill its own citizens.
Joe,
but very in keeping with the American government.
Yeah.
Joe, I'd say that you were conflating the criminal penalty that someone is facing with a justifiable reason for wanting to end your life, such as being in hospice and, end of life care, and you're in so much pain that you know you're going to die that day. Just end it now.
Well, I mean, I don't know. Well,
having a criminal conviction against you isn't attacking your nerve endings. It's those people trying to avoid having to spend more days with their conscience, maybe,
or being brutalized in jail.
Well, then I'm in favor of us reforming our hiring practices for prisoners.
If I was
are mean.
If I committed some heinous crime and so it was the choice for me was either spend the rest of my life in prison with no chance of getting out, or being executed, I'd take the execution because to me, life would not be worth living anymore.
Especially if you knew for sure you were not going to get out, then
if I knew for sure I'm never going to see the light of day, then I don't need to be here.
So I want to say, welcome back, Sister Danger. We can see you, and I'm pretty sure we can hear you, but we can definitely see you. You're not just a pile of pixels.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with my computer. It's just like I restarted it, and it's just super laggy. So I don't know what that's about. So I'm using my phone, and I have 30% battery left. And
right, okay. Well, do you have a charger handy that you can charge it while you're on?
Maybe I could find one somewhere. I don't know. That requires the gumption to get up and go putz around with it, you know? I mean, I know where its normal charger is, but that's in another room. So,
okay. Yeah, see,
before we get too far off, though, I want to circle around to the topic in terms of what's the word I'm looking for? Humane execution. Is a guillotine better than lethal injection?
No. The brain doesn't die. The brain doesn't die with the severing of the head, and because the brain is still alive, you basically can still experience things going on around you. It's kind of like a chicken with its head cut off for at least some period of time. Probably the most humane form of death that we have is some kind of lethal injection. One of the worst ways to die that's been documented is actually suffocating of any sort, because your body you basically experience panic and fear no matter what when you suffocate. I used to actually be in favor of the death penalty, and then I stopped being in favor of the death penalty when I took classes on basically crime scene investigation procedures and how evidence is gathered and processed, and how good the evidence is when it is gathered. And basically what it came down to is just that, even in most best case scenarios, the evidence is has so much room for error that when you're at, a 40% accuracy rate, if you're lucky, and then you're staking somebody's life on that for forever, that basically turned it around a lot for me. I was like, I can't justify that. You have a 60% chance or more that something is wrong here, and this person's going to die over that. Like, if that was your life on the line, you wouldn't be so eager to see that.
I also used to support the death penalty also, and over the years I got softer and softer on it. And now it's like, no. I mean, you the biggest clincher for me was you can't undo it. Like, there is no sorry, go, we were wrong. Now you can go about your life. I mean, there's no going back. You can't make it up. There's nothing you can do to make it better. It's just done.
But I would like to say though that, like,
go ahead.
I would give myself the caveat though that is a stance that I have because I believe we live in a society that affords us to be able to have that stance. I think if we lived in a more, I guess, brutal society or law of the jungle society, I would not have that same stance, because there are some things that I do not think are, like, from a societal standpoint, if you don't have the technology or the knowledge to be able to deal with them, that overall they are ultimately a greater harm to the populace than it is a harm to get rid of them, which might be a terrible thing to say, but people, I don't know, like I guess I could expound on it, but nobody wants to hear that. So, but we are not in that society, right? We're not living in law of the jungle, right? So
Even if we were, though, I'm not so sure that that type of thing is that type of repression is necessarily effective. I mean, 200 years ago in the UK, there was 200 hanging offenses, including theft, but people still stole stuff. The death penalty isn't necessarily a deterrent, right? It isn't. I mean, if you're desperate, you'll steal something, even if they're going to cut your hand off, right? I mean, that's just the way it is. And
Sure.
the other problem I have with the notion of the sort of rougher levels of justice is that, you know, corporal punishment is not a great leap from that. You know, torturing someone for a crime, you know, for example, that used to happen all the time. And I've mentioned this before, but I went to the torture museum in Amsterdam, and you're looking around at all these absolutely grisly contraptions that were used on real people.
The bronze
You know,
bowl.
you're looking at it and you can't help but think of the torn flesh that used to be on the spikes and all that kind of shit, right?
But
And you think to
torturing
yourself,
is
and I think to myself, hey, look at these devices, and these were made by people who called themselves civilized.
torturing is in no way, like in my opinion, the order of severity in wrongs here. Torture comes after just killing somebody.
I agree. I agree.
Like,
Just killing
straight
someone
up,
is merciful
torture
compared
is
to torture.
it is by a long ways premeditated, right? And with no other purpose than to specifically find ways to inflict the worst kinds of pains that you can on somebody. Sometimes not even to just to do that for amusement until death. I can't think of. I mean, at least if you were, you know, fighting in a war or whatever, and you're like, these are my enemies and I have to kill or be killed, and you just shoot them and kill them, you're not turning your mind towards, you know, like just how can I make the suffering of this human even greater, right? And I feel like that's just its whole own separate mindset. Torture museums are very fascinating, though. I went to the torture museum in Siena, Italy. It was
The
pretty cool.
mentality of the people who did these torture devices, the mentality was, and this is what fascinated me the most, because I did not know this until I went to the museum. But back in the day, most often the crime that people would get tortured for would be blasphemy. So that's someone's opinion about something you said. So that's what you could get tortured for, right? And so the thing is, there's certain devices. I mean, you talk about the death penalty not being a deterrent. There are certain devices where you would take the accused to the device and they would show them the device and they would confess rather than be tortured. And the whole point back then, their logic was this is the logic of justice in the 16th century. If you confess, you were definitely guilty. So if we torture you to get to confession, we have done justice because you confessed.
Right.
That was their logic at the time. That made sense to them at the time.
Yeah.
I mean, the same thing still, I mean, not to torture levels, but on a psychological level, similar things are still done today. I mean, you know, to try to well, what I mean by that is where people were during the oh God. When someone is being psychologically evaluated at the station, I'm forgetting regular words right now because I've had too much weed. When someone is being evaluated,
interrogated,
they can get someone to say that they've committed a certain crime even though they haven't, and they can do it by torturing someone. Not physically, but psychologically. You know, they can get someone to admit something, and then they end up finding a way, even though it's not supposed to be able to be used in court the way that they want. They still end up being able to do that. So this same sort of thing happens today, but just not to the same level as physical torture.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, the now one little caveat too. When about the guillotine. So it's true that the blade, going through you doesn't necessarily kill you instantly, although it can, depending on where it lands and all that. But once you lose blood pressure in your brain, you're going to pass out. You're not going to be conscious. So that's going to be fairly quickly. The other thing too, just another correction: chicken has their head cutting off. That's the body running around, and that's actually left. That's muscle action. That's straight nerve impulses. That's
So
Joe, I want to know if you would support commuting everybody who's on the death row to life without parole.
I would, but then
That's
I would give them the option to get at it to take the execution if they wanted to.
That's the sentence that you couldn't stand. You thought would be unbearable.
I mean, I can't stand it. That doesn't mean other people wouldn't.
Do you think that some of them maybe because you would commute their sentence and then give them the option that they would then kill themselves, whereas they might have rather wanted to keep doing their appeals?
Oh yeah, well, because remember, yeah, probably. Because if you think about an appeal, I mean, your appeal is for one of two things, right? It's either commute the sentence or to overturn your sentence.
Yeah.
So, in either case, those people probably want to continue to live. So if you did commute their sentence to life without parole, they'd probably be okay with that. They'd probably say, all right, well, I'll be alive at least. So I think that's a decision that different people are going to make differently.
Have you ever heard of a case where you think that person should never be released in the public?
Very, very rare. I mean, serial killers, and like serial pederasts.
I can think of one in particular, very close to me, that I don't really think that person ever needs to get out. And
Dick Cheney.
Yeah. Well,
Who? What? Who?
Under what we're saying here, I feel like I would be choosing the worst, harshest penalty for them. The most painful thing.
But that's another reason why too. Like I said, I don't want the state to normally be executing people. I think that shouldn't really happen because there's too many problems with it.
So I wanted to say to the guys in the chat about what they're chatting about. The Iron Maiden wasn't a thing. That was made up. That's like a circus prop.
Yeah. That's absolutely not true. I've seen Iron Maidens.
It was a circus prop, though. It wasn't a medieval torture device.
Not true.
What? No, that's not true.
That's not true. I've seen them. I've stood.
We're not saying people didn't make them. We're not saying people didn't use them.
They were made, yes, but they weren't an actual torture device. I've seen them also, but it wasn't a medieval torture device.
Okay,
well, certainly wasn't a medieval spa device. What do you think it was?
Yeah, I mean, seriously, there's like a couple of them in the Amsterdam Museum that are like 400 or 500 years old. So I don't know what to tell you.
So, okay, I'm just putting the article in the thing there. Despite its reputation as a medieval instrument of torture, there is no evidence of the existence of Iron Maidens before the early 19th century.
Yeah, it's before the early 19th century. Yes, they were circus props.
Well, maybe they existed for the same reason of the term.
Built up around it to sell tickets. It's not real.
The thing, because quite frankly, an Iron Maiden wouldn't torture you. I mean, if you look at the spikes, you would just die.
You just die.
The ones that I'm talking about didn't have spikes on the inside. They were literally a cage that was barely bigger than your body, and you'd be hung from a tree and subject to whatever passersby would inflict on you.
That existed, but
that was called an Iron Maiden. As that in the museum, they called that the Iron Maiden, which is why I was thinking I didn't have any envisaging of spikes or anything like that.
Okay. So yes, what you're talking about absolutely did exist. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
I just wanted to say while we're on this topic that everybody probably knows on the panel knows, but maybe the audience doesn't. I mean, I'm for restorative justice. I think that there is a possible future, if we have the bravery to do it, of reducing the number of prisoners down to an extremely small number. There are certainly always going to be prisoners who, for whatever reason, we can't find a way to integrate them back into society, or restorative justice is simply not the way that will mitigate their future potential for committing heinous acts. But what we have now, the penal system that America uses and other parts of the world uses, is a relic that isn't psychologically defensible. It's certainly not effective as a deterrent. It does nothing to make sure that people come out of prison ready to re-enter society. There's very little evidence that anything that our prison system does is a benefit to society as a whole, other than it puts people that we don't want to think of out of sight, out of mind.
They all got sent to Australia.
Well, here's one thing, something that when listening to Jack, because I totally agree with everything Jack just said. The one thing that occurred to me while I'm listening, though, most crime can be ameliorated by changing the circumstances, the situation in our society, as Jack said. The irony is, there's one group of criminals that doesn't apply to.
The rich who never go to jail.
Exactly. You got it. White collar criminals, people who already have everything that they need. They don't need to steal from people. They don't need to do horrible things to people because they already have all the things that they need. And
our prison system doesn't deal with them anyway, because none of them ever go to jail unless they're Bernie Madoff, and only because he stole from other rich people.
Yeah.
Bernie Madoff is an interesting one, though, because, I mean, I'm not sure how old he was when he finally got busted and put away, but he made a calculated guess that he would get away with it long enough to live a literal billionaire lifestyle for 15, 20 years. It's worth going to jail for the last 6 or 7 years of your life if you can get away with that, right?
Well, the sick part about it is that there were several people who were sounding, the alarm bells for years, and no one bothered to look because they didn't really want to look, because basically in the way he set up this scheme, that's the sick part about a Ponzi scheme. There's always people besides the person running the scheme who are actually making money, at least for a while.
Brian Epstein,
Right. So they don't really give a fuck if it's all cooked books, as long as they're making money.
Sure. But I mean, like this dynamic you just said, I mean, the whole Brian Epstein thing, everybody knew what he was up to for decades, right?
You mean Jeffrey Epstein?
You mean Jeffrey?
Brian Epstein was the guy who was up to hooking up powerful people with underage girls.
Jeffrey Epstein.
Oh, sorry, did I say Brian? No, Brian is a music producer, isn't he?
All right, Brian, wherever you are.
Jeffrey Epstein. Yeah, I apologize to the memory of Brian Epstein. But anyway, yeah, Jeffrey Epstein. That's the guy I meant to say. But yeah, he did all that stuff, and everybody knew what he was up to. It was an open secret, and still the powerful people went to his things. They went to his yacht. They went to his island. They did the things totally knowing,
And then the lawyers who helped get him off ended up as Trump's.
Right.
Bill Barr was one of the guys who got Jeffrey Epstein off.
Yeah.
When he was almost convicted the first time.
Yeah.
And the same man's father employed Jeffrey Epstein at a college.
That's right. Yeah.
The web is very connected there.
Okay, so Ghislaine Maxwell, his former accomplice, has been in jail now for some time, and she's tried any number of different ways to get out. And if she gets suicided in jail like Jeffrey Epstein did, no one's going to buy it. So she might actually get to go to trial at some point. And what do you think the fallout from that's going to be? Because she potentially could undo an awful lot of people if she wanted to, but how can it play out where the powerful people don't get stung or burnt?
Well, I'm trying to remember the name of the type of inquest that they're going to have, but all that stuff can be sealed. Anything that
JFK style.
I mean, they can leave she can give up anybody she wants if it's in private, and everybody who is around to hear it is either part of the same network. I mean, it doesn't matter if she says it's Bill Clinton or Donald Trump or whoever else. It's simply not going to leave that room, or it might leave that room, but nothing's going to happen to the people who did it. I don't think that Ghislaine Maxwell has any It's certainly not the kind of potential that Epstein did to, like, unbalance the apple cart or whatever.
Hang on a minute. I mean, I don't know how familiar you are with Ghislaine Maxwell, but her father was Robert Maxwell, who used to be a UK media magnate back in the day, and he died under what's called mysterious circumstances.
Right. Falling off a boat.
Anyway, and it was rumored that he was working for Mossad and possibly a double agent for MI5 or whatever as well. Right. And, so, I mean, Ghislaine Maxwell has a history. You could make a hell of an interesting biopic of her. Sure. Make a hell of a movie for sure. But she was such a devotee of Jeffrey Epstein, though. It borderline on some kind of psychosis, the way she was into him despite everything.
I don't think it was a fight. I think they shared a particular kink because she was involved in the rapes of these young women.
Yeah.
I think they were peas in a pod. They were not
right.
There was not one who was a devotee of the other. It was a mutually beneficial arrangement for them.
Yeah. Right. I was just curious if you knew, Paul, since you had talked about her father. Did the silver hammer belong to him?
Yes. But when I say I don't think Ghislaine has the same power to upset things as Epstein, it's in part because of the special agreement that Epstein made, which was this wild thing of being able to protect all potential co-conspirators, even if they come out in the future, from prosecution. And so the fact that they have to, for whatever reason, just because of the way our system works, they have to adhere to that pretty insane plea agreement for Epstein, who's dead, means that whatever Ghislaine says, most of the people who she could potentially out, they'll be fodder for newspapers maybe and fodder for media circus, but they're not going to be punished in any way, not by the legal system that we have.
Yeah, well, this is the thing that so much is riding on this, and this is I don't have. It's a shame that regular people like me can't go, oh, I have so much faith that the justice system is going to do the right thing. So,
yeah, imagine if you weren't white.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, the fact is, white or not, I don't know anybody who actually has faith in the justice system right now.
That's true. It's probably at a pretty low level. Even if you're in the far right and you generally agree with everything that police do or whatever, or the prison system. I mean, obviously the far right does not trust the legal system at the moment, as they've all been told that everything is stolen and, secret cabals run everything. So I don't think there's anybody on the political spectrum who trusts this legal system, which is just another sort of chink in this idea that any of our democratic systems are operating or functional right now.
Well,
I know you're wanting to talk, Joe, but just real quick. So how come JFK Jr. didn't show up at Dealey Plaza the other day?
Don't you mean two JFK Juniors? Because they have two of them.
Well, this is the one thing that, and I generally, I tend to be an optimistic person, but the one thing that has me very pessimistic is that things have gotten so messed up. It's like, I don't know. I can't see a path to fixing it short of having that pop off where we basically go really just chaos and then, burn ourselves out. And then, then we're left with the aftermath. And and the thing is, I know there are people across political spectra that would actually think that's a good thing or think that, and I'm like, I don't think so, because none of those things go as well as you think they're going to go. The people who initiated the French Revolution, which they all got killed by the revolutionaries afterwards.
Yeah. So I mean, there's
the Russian monarchy didn't do so well out of their revolution either.
Yeah, and you always end up with a Robespierre who just goes crazy.
I want to see something like Anonymous. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that it kind of feels like right now we're at a moment where the saying about the tree of liberty watered with the blood of tyrants makes a whole lot of sense. The problem with that is, like what Joe said, a lot of times those things don't go as you want them to. So.
Yeah, or there's a lot more water than the tree needs to survive.
Conspiracy theory watch, based on what we've been talking here. This week, there's been conspiracy theorists on TikTok who have been putting out, that they're not saying it on any of the broadcast things like Rachel Maddow or Tucker Carlson, but they buried this news story on all of the major news sites that Prince Andrew's trial is set for next fall. And it's related to the Epstein stuff.
He was one of the people on Epstein's Island, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And he does have a rape accusation, and the trial date was set for next fall. It's on all the major news stations' websites as an article that you can find. You will not find any of their news shows where they publicly talked about it.
Yeah, that's actually something I haven't heard anything about, and that's sort of surprising since Delver into dark corners.
What's interesting about it too is he claims that he doesn't know this woman, but there's multiple pictures from more than one event with her with him. So it's like, dude, you say you don't know her. Here you at 3 different functions where she's like, arm in arm with you.
He claims that all those pictures are doctored, which is a pretty bold thing to claim if they're not doctored and you know it, right?
Amy, he did claim he can't sweat, so bold claims are not out of the realm of his.
Sorry, I got the wrong end of the stick. I thought you was talking about Prince Andrew, but you're talking about Bill Clinton, weren't you?
No, Prince Andrew.
No,
Prince
Andrew.
No, it was
Andrew's the one who claimed he couldn't sweat.
Oh, right. Okay. I thought Bill Clinton claimed he couldn't sweat, but that was he didn't inhale. That's I'm just wrong false claim.
I want to see Anonymous break into all of these files and make this shit publicly available to people when it happens, because that I don't know, it's almost just a dog and pony show. There's so many people that are wrapped up and involved in this. There's no way that it's going to come to light. It's going to be like, oh, this would incriminate too many people, and therefore we've got to keep it a secret for the next 75 years.
But what if, let's just say, what if that happens, Sister Danger, right? And we find out that, I don't know, 300 of the people in Congress are kitty fiddlers, like documented proof, right? What do we do with that?
We literally fire their fucking asses from Congress, and we put in whoever is next in the line of succession under emergency guidelines of some sort. And then we hold new votes. It will be a mass cleaning of everything, and it will be beautiful.
So that's all a great idea. Anonymous has been useless for some time now. Today
the 5th of November. What day is it today?
The 6th. It's the 6th.
Oh.
Yesterday was the 5th.
I'm a day late and a dollar short.
Anonymous has been kind of useless for a while. They used to be this amazing thing, kind of scary and way too much power and getting way too involved in a lot of things. Even though I agreed with a lot of the avenues they went down. But the Trump era kind of scattered Anonymous because they were all over the map when it came to Trump.
Well, it's largely because of the transition for 4chan and then to 8chan and the takeover by Ron Watkins and what is it, Tom Watkins? I can't remember, the father and son Watkins duo that took over the 4chan boards and then migrated everything over to 8chan, later 8kun, in part because Anonymous was a pretty clearly left-wing organization of hackers, and Watkins and the running of the 8 boards or the Chan boards really had a pretty distinct right-wing flavor. And I think it was really that the chant boards were just overwhelmed, and Anonymous was never a hacker collective where everybody knew each other at all times. So it's pretty easy to get scattered when everybody's anonymous. Plus, a lot happened between Occupy Wall Street and today. It's just
Right.
lots of lives changed.
Hey, can we not use autism as a fucking insult? Can we not fucking do that, Vegas? Can we? I mean, is that too much to fucking ask?
Yeah.
Thank you.
For Proctor Hawk, I'll just do this.
Yeah. The other thing too, as far as Anonymous goes, I mean, the whole time I was really hoping they would do stuff like that, Sister Danger, like all sorts of really cool things. And most of what they did was trite, like, oh, we messed with somebody's website, ooh, like that's nice, big fucking deal. That and again, because Jack said, it's generally they're on the left. That's the kind of like Twitter bullshit that leftists do that pisses me off. Like, not that they're wrong. It's just that, slick burn. Like, no one, the other side doesn't give a fuck. They're heavily armed and they want to kill us. They don't care that you fucked up their website.
Who's the other guy that did all the, I don't think he can come to America. He's somewhere. Got all those files. Wait, what? Who?
Julian Assange?
Yeah, that's who I'm talking about.
Yeah,
I mean, same idea, right?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is the WikiLeaks platform was it's a great idea, and it's been sort of weirdly managed, or I don't even know where to start with that, because I'm very much in favor of getting all that information out there. But it's also been used quite a bit to kind of fuck with our elections, and I don't know.
I mean, yeah,
that's a complicated topic.
It's no surprise that all the information they put out was all against, Western governments, and like, we never saw anything on Russia or China, So that's why I way back at the time, there were a lot of people thinking he was like heroic. I'm like, no, don't you see what he is? And who's the guy who can't leave Russia?
Ed Snowden.
Snowden.
Yeah.
He's another one. The people were like, oh, he's so great, and like, no, he's
I respectfully disagree with that. I admire Ed Snowden in lots of ways. I've seen what's his name, Malcolm Nance, several times argue for why Ed Snowden is a traitor. I don't know, man. I think you got to be really careful, making whistleblowing illegal. To the point where, whether you agree with what he did or not, the fact is we're already too close to a totalitarian state, and everything that fights against that, I'm for it. Simple as that.
I don't think he did anything to get us further away from or put the brakes on that at all.
In the sense that nothing got accomplished because Obama just laughed it off at the time. Obama was like, privacy? What a quaint concept, and now, he literally laughed it off. And I was so angry at him at the time that he did that. Because, yeah, you're right. It didn't result in any positive change. And you know what? We haven't hit the streets over it. I'm just as guilty as y'all,
Well, the fact that he's in Russia, I don't think is an accident. All I'll say.
Well,
I think.
There's
who has the power to protect him besides Russia?
Yeah, there's very few other places. It's like, yeah, what is he going to go to? Argentina or, there's all these other countries that Bolivia. Let's say he goes to Bolivia, and the U.S. will just frickin' invade or send SEAL Team 6 in. It's really unlikely that he could be protected anywhere, even Japan maybe.
See, I think it's funny because Zach, I know you have a tendency toward conspiracies. I don't see how you don't see that he's an enemy agent asset.
I think he's definitely a person who doesn't have allegiances to the United States, but then like it'd be pretty hard to say I have huge allegiances to the United States. I don't see him as being a tool operated that way. I think that he's definitely a guy who is most focused on what the United States does. And let's be frank, the United States does some of the worst shit in the world. I mean, this is a country that is in up to 7 or more in during the Obama administration, more or less secret ongoing wars that have
Right.
never stopped. I mean, we've in you know we've put our hands into every major election in any democracy in the world. I just don't know that, focusing your attention on America's misdeeds is like out of keeping with somebody who is interested in who in the world is doing things bad. That doesn't mean that he's not supported by bad characters in Russia. But like, if you're going to go 1-to-1 on like, is Russia worse than the United States? I just don't think you can make that argument. I don't think
agree.
that there's any country in the world that you can put directly up against America and compare like evil deed for evil deed and have America necessarily come out with a wide margin being, the better country.
I mean, it depends on what kind of evil deeds you're going to compare, because there's no such thing as like versus like in this conversation. That what American foreign policy does compared to Russian foreign policy is clearly way worse in most obvious ways, but there's also other ways where, the Russian internal policy is so much worse than American internal policy. So, how do you compare those things?
With regards the WikiLeaks and Edward Snowden, you find the person that values the truth over anything else, whether or not it's going to hurt us, and that person is a very useful pawn to any other intelligence agency that just wants
That's
to
a thought.
So that they didn't have to have the intent prior to that, but they could be the useful idiot being used.
Yeah,
As
and
well with Facebook.
It's not like I think that Snowden is some angelic figure or anything. Like, everybody has feet of clay, and it's very possible that he is being used. Is it a bad thing that the information about terrible things the United States does is out there for us to see? No, it's not. I think it's important for us to know those things. I'm a supporter of Chelsea Manning, and maybe of the 3 figures that are commonly cited for these type of leaks, Chelsea Manning might be the least maybe problematic or whatever, but there's going to be people who will point to Manning and say she is a pawn of some foreign state for exposing or helping degrade American patriotism by pulling back the curtain. There's not going to be an uncomplicated scenario in which secret documents are leaked to whatever, leaked out into the public. I just think, as we said about WikiLeaks, that was one of the less responsible sort of document dumps. It doesn't mean that I'm against it. I think it's important, but it would have been nice if there was a little bit more careful scrutiny in regard for how the information was disseminated, in large part because some of it just like came out in such a big dump that
Chelsea Manning released 250,000 documents.
Yeah, there's things people couldn't really sift through it all, and it was so much information that it essentially nothing gets done because it's like we're buried in data.
But see, I would say that it was carefully curated. That's the whole point. The point wasn't to affect change; it was to cause dissent.
Well, here's the thing that I'm uncomfortable with. I'm uncomfortable with the notion or maybe implication that if you do something that America looks bad, you're probably working for America's enemies. by that logic, I could have been put in jail for my live journal or my YouTube channel. You know what I mean? Because I criticize my country.
Howard Zinn said that dissent is the highest form of patriotism.
I agree with that.
Absolutely.
And the argument has been, and again, I've seen Malcolm Nance make very strong arguments against anybody considering Chelsea Manning or Ed Snowden or either of them to be patriots. And I understand all those arguments, but I think the principle of people in a power structure being able to say, hang on a minute, my superiors or my government is breaking its own laws. They should be able to blow the whistle without consequences, or maybe not without consequences. That's overstating it. But you should be able to blow the whistle for sure, and let the chips fall where they may, consequences or not. You know what I mean? It depends on the situation. Everyone's different.
Vegas's comment about, but he swore an oath to protect those secrets. Are there not secrets that are so heinous that you should,
Yeah, I don't care what kind of oath you sign or swear. If you witness a commanding officer advocating torture, or if you're seeing civilians being gunned down, I don't care what your oath is. Your oath to human decency needs to supersede that.
Well, and sometimes oaths that you take for military purposes can conflict with each other, can't they?
Yes.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
important then to have a good idea of an ethical tree of decision making that you're going to be abiding by. And sometimes those that want to sign people up to oaths that they're going to blindly follow no matter what, maybe those are the people that you shouldn't be trusting.
Right.
Especially when they're trying to get you to sign those oaths right out of high school.
Yeah. And they're recruiting directly from the high school.
Be right back.
All right.
Well,
I thought that military oaths were that it was written into them that if you were being asked to do things that were illegal, you were supposed to not do them, to refuse your orders or whatever.
Right.
So just to be clear, though, we're talking about people out of high school. Edward Snowden was 30. So, he's not a kid.
So I saw the Snowden movie, and I saw the whole process of him being onboarded. He was 30 when he did what he did.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Raven, what's on your mind? You've got a funny expression.
A whole bunch of stuff. To start with, Joe is killing me with that White Castle. I love you, Joe. Fuck you, man. You guys familiar with White Castle? Everybody, because I know it's not nationwide.
I'm familiar with it, but I haven't ever been there, and I've been told that if they have these tiny little burgers, and if you eat a bunch of them, you feel really sick.
They're amazing. Yeah, they're small. They're sliders, and you can eat about 54 of them, I think, before maybe 55. They're really good, but you can get them frozen, and they're not as good. You have to get them from the restaurant, and I don't have one near me, so fuck you, Joe.
I've seen how they make them. They bake them like a cake, like in a giant pan of all the buns together, and then they cut those buns out, But they bake all the buns together in this big baking rack that makes it look like a big cake with buns on it.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, they make them factory style.
The burgers.
So that when you get the burgers, you can pull them apart.
No.
The burgers, the patty is that big and square. It's a square patty, and it's got 5 holes in it, so they can cook in 30 seconds on the grill. They cook really fast on the grill.
On top of onions, so they're basically steamed on top of a bed of
On
onions.
top of onions. God.
Can you get custom orders there, or is it one of those places where the way the way that it comes is the way that it comes?
Pretty much the way it comes is the way it comes.
Yeah, pretty much it is what it is. They're gross. They're awesome. They're amazing.
Did you say they're gross? They're awesome.
Yeah, it's some of the nastiest shit you'll eat. They're great.
That's how I feel about hot dogs.
Oh, they're better than that and worse.
I had White Castle when I was in Chicago, and what I remember it tasting like was cat food.
I've never eaten cat food, so
Yeah.
How do you know what cat food tastes like?
The smell of the 85% of what we taste is what we smell. So
yeah.
No, as a kid, I ate cat food.
There you go. Yeah. And
then cat food.
Thank you for defending me, though.
And their French fries, they don't do the regular fries like everybody else. They don't have like the shoestring French fries. Theirs are crinkle cut. So it's like the only fast food restaurant where you get crinkle cut fries. Everybody else does the shoestring. And they're pretty good. Pretty good.
I think my favorite will always be the waffle cut fries.
Oh, those are good. So like White Castle is the oldest. I just watched a video about this like a week ago. They're the oldest fast food restaurant in the world.
Yep.
Wow.
In the world?
In the world, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they were the first. They were the first. And they're still going, and they're still family owned, I believe.
So we know who to blame.
All the ones in St. Louis are in these little White Castle buildings, which I don't know if they're like that in New Jersey as well, but
everywhere.
Yeah, it's kind of corny.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
Yeah, lunch meat fries.
Most of them are open 24/7.
Right.
So you could be 4 o'clock. So it's very They're very popular. Like especially on the weekend. People go out to the bar. You get drunk. You come out and we have 24-hour diners in New Jersey, but if you live somewhere that there's no 24-hour diner, it's always White Castle.
So it's White Castle.
We're talking about food.
Harold and Kumar. Harold and Kumar go to White Castle.
And that movie takes place in New Jersey, or at least it supposedly does anyway. I don't know if it was actually filmed here, or at least parts were.
Hey, what's the difference between a beanie and a ski cap?
What?
A beanie has those propellers.
Okay, so you asked what was on my mind. You asked what was on my mind. That was like the first thing. Then the second thing is, I don't give a shit about Snowden or Chelsea Manning.
So, what do you all feel about the whole "Let's Go Brandon" thing? There some of like CNN and MSNBC are responding as if people are using it. It's almost like people supporting ISIS, and I'm like, oh my God, no! It's just people saying "fuck Joe Biden." I mean, it's not some bigger thing than that. I mean, how do you feel about it?
There's a Democrat response to that, and it's "Thank you, Brandon." So they're saying thank you, Biden. But yeah, and there are some people that are in the party, like because I'm a member of the party, like an elected, seated member of the party, and people that are on the committee with me are on Facebook saying things like, "Oh, this is brilliant. We're turning it right around by saying thank you, Brandon." It's like, that's stupid. It's stupid. What they're doing is stupid. What you're doing is stupid. The whole thing is stupid.
By doing that, aren't they feeding it more?
Like adults. Like, Jesus Christ. Like, the left has no problem saying fuck Joe Biden. Why are conservatives hiding behind this, like, kids game? It's so dumb.
Stupid. It's so stupid.
Well, I think about though how, like, while Trump was president, all the things that were said against Trump, and someone, what was the awards show? Who was it that came up on stage and the very first thing he said was "fuck Trump," right? And yet people are still there are people that are freaking out over this, saying, "Oh, it's inappropriate." And yes, I know that people could be saying just "fuck Joe Biden," but they're hiding behind something that allows them to. It's a meme, right? It seems to be pretty powerful. And I got to admit that I've laughed at it a number of times. So
what's interesting is I being, like I said, being a member of the Democratic Party, as far as like I am on the committee in my county, which means I had to be elected for it. So I'm surrounded by these people all the time. And by the way, only 3 people voted for me, and they all live in this house. And I got my seat. That's how easy it was. Anyway, so I'm surrounded by these people on Facebook and at the meetings and everything else. And nobody is upset about the Brandon thing, or none of them are saying that it's always so inappropriate. I don't know what your experience is, but mine is they think it's stupid because they're like, we said fuck Trump. Why can't they just say fuck Biden? So I don't know. I think there's a lot of weird kind of like a counter hype, like the right is saying, oh, look, the left is getting all upset, but I don't see any evidence of it.
Presumes right that MSNBC and stuff like that are like playing right into it and pretending like this is some offensive thing.
I don't know.
It's just like more dumb.
What's supposedly offensive about it? I mean, I know what it's supposed to be a stand-in for, but I don't quite understand how that's particularly offensive.
Yeah,
I guess
considering that there was somebody the other day saying, when do we get to use the guns? Fuck Joe Biden is pretty tame by comparison.
Yeah,
so I mean that's the thing that like
elementary school tame.
Yeah, I saw it and I was like, I looked it up because I wasn't sure what it meant, and I was like, oh, okay, whatever.
I watch MSNBC. I saw no mention of it on anything that I watch on MSNBC. I only know of it because of Twitter.
I think it's just a dog whistle. I mean,
I don't even think it's that. I think it's just kind of like it's like what Vegas said. It's about bias. It highlights bias more than anything else.
Well, I mean,
Go ahead.
One thing that was brought up is there's a manufacturer. It's they either manufacture guns or they manufacture accessories for guns, and there was some accessory that they wrote "Let's Go Brandon" on, and it was either CNN or MSNBC were saying, "Oh, this is a threat to the president. We have to stop this." And I'm like, "Oh, you've got to be kidding me."
Yeah, that's hype.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I think that's just the news media being the media. Like they're just doing the like, let's react to everything because fuck, we got 24 hours we gotta fill, guys.
And that's one thing that it's kind of sad to me, or very very sad to me, that when I've heard the excuse for why the media sucks so bad, they usually like, oh, it's a 24-hour news cycle. I'm like, right. So you guys gave us more relevant news back when you had 2-3 hours a day.
Right.
And now, when you actually have the time to go in depth on these stories and actually give us not just fucking sound bites, but actually give us the media and explain things in detail and go into it, and you fucking don't.
It's like you have 24 hours to get this right, and you're still fucking it up.
Yeah. They think that's a defense. Well, it's 24 hours. Yeah, that's why you have all the time in the world to get it right.
I would love to see. I would love to see. I know this not something like this will never happen, but I would just love to see, like, if every, like, there's like 5 or 6, I think it's 5 companies now that pretty much own everything that we see on TV. They own all the channels. They pretty much own all of media. And I think it would be great if we made it so each one of those companies that own, that's larger than a certain amount, that each one of those companies would be forced to have a news channel that has no commercials.
Right.
And it would force them to actually have news that is not guided by views, because that's if making money isn't the thing, then if those companies want to have more than just those those channels that have that news. They could have other channels, but they have to call it entertainment instead of news.
Yeah.
Right. The problem,
I just want to very quick. Did anybody see that CNN actually funded OAN? That was a
I heard about that.
CNN had put in. I don't know what the dollar amount was, but it was a significant amount of funding
it was
into OAN.
at its start, right? It was like a part of the kickoff.
I'm not sure it was only
No.
start.
Sorry, I need to correct you, Jack. AT&T, the parents of CNN did it. So CNN didn't do it. The parents of CNN did it.
Right.
Regardless, it does sort of look like they're funding their own opposition because it's all just a circus.
Right. I mean, they see that there's money to be made on that side of the market, so they want their piece of that part of the pie.
Right. And one to show you, I mean, too much of the media is built around stoking the audience that they have. Like, okay, this audience wants to hear this shit. This other audience wants to hear this other shit. So we'll just make money on both sides, and we don't give a fuck about the result in the middle or afterward.
So there was a time in my life when the news was just the news, and this was pre CNN or maybe at the very beginning of CNN, when the news was just the news, and I have a hard time saying without bias that it was better or not. I don't know if it had something to do with my age and like coming of age and everything else. But before that time, like back in that time when the news was just the news, I didn't like the news. I didn't watch the news. I didn't care about the news. It was after the news became more entertaining that I became more interested. And I don't know if those things are related or if it's just when I came to age.
They're definitely related. I mean, and the news definitely was better. Now, to be fair, or to be clear on history, the news sucked for pretty much prior to 1953 and up until 1994 was okay. And anytime outside that time, it's been pretty much horrendous. Because if you go back to, like the 1800s, they had the muckrakers and yellow journalism and stuff. So it's been a problem. Bias in media has always been a problem. It was just that period you had there with Murrow and Harry Reasoner and Bill Beutel and all these kind of guys that there's a period about 30, 40 years where the news was actually worthwhile. And then the rest of the time it's been absolute hot garbage.
Well, when it comes to TV news media, I think things went to shit in 1996 when CNN had competition of Fox News and MSNBC. And it was from that point on where cable news media was all about ratings.
Yeah, and what the cable news, the big three, the CNN, MSNBC, and Fox all have in common is that they're not even really reporting the news as such. They're sort of setting a narrative. Each network has its own narrative that they set, and they don't vary very much from. You know what I mean? And for better or worse, usually worse, because I think journalism suffers in general. It's not just this cable news problem. Another problem is that for various reasons, investigative journalism almost has no budget anymore because that's not how the media companies make their best money. It's very expensive to send people out and do long investigative pieces. You're paying someone's wages maybe for a year before you get any result at all from that kind of journalism. And so they can't afford it. And so we don't really have a lot of investigative journalism. And what we're end up left with is journalists basically giving platforms to people to speak. They're not really questioning it or investigating it or, and they have their talking points. And usually they spend a couple hours in prep before they go on. And they're just doing what they're told because they don't have time to dig into it that much more.
That's how you get the Sinclair. Everybody says the same thing.
Two things. One was I knew that things were going bad when Andrea Thompson, who was on Babylon 5, when she went on CNN, it was like basically CNN did a house cleaning. They pretty much got rid of all the legit presenters, and they brought in people that were younger and attractive, and it was all about appealing to getting people to watch. And so that's when I knew, oh, this is gonna suck, because like they got an actress doing the news now instead of an actual journalist, someone with a journalistic degree. You know, and then what the fuck was the other thing? I'll think of it.
I will recommend Amanpour and Co., which is from PBS and the BBC, I think jointly, something like that. One of the more like, if you want to go back to the old school feeling of like PBS NewsHour, then they more or less have that sensibility, and it is publicly funded broadcasting.
What's really sad with CNN is that you go back to like, you know, the start of the Gulf War. That's what they really started to blow up, and for you know, basically for, you know, 10 years, they were great. They really, you know, because they did have the time, and they seemed to always be able to get in and get the story. And you know, they had John Holloman and those guys that reported from Iraq at the time, and all.
Baby Jessica made CNN blow the fuck up. I mean, you know, that was wall-to-wall coverage of a kid in a well. You know, it's 24 hours a day, and they had somebody on the scene. You know, and then half the country got hooked on CNN after that.
Hey, can I? It was getting kind of late, and I want to sort of wind the show down pretty soon. But there is a topic I wanted to bring up that I just remembered, and I apologize once again for bringing up Bill Maher. But on Bill Maher's thing last night, he did a thing about how he compared like the cryptocurrency, for example, is really bad for the environment, right? In terms of mining the cryptocurrency. And okay, Michael, I want you to jump in on that in a second. But what Bill Maher was saying was that, you know, you can't be sort of pro the environment and pro cryptocurrency. Thoughts?
First thought is that the mining model of cryptocurrency is changing with the altcoins to, instead of proof of work, which is what requires all that intensive mining of problems that really aren't solving anything. It's just problems to solve problems. They're switching from that to proof of stake, which is you just have a bunch of it and you trust somebody that you delegate to, and a whole bunch of people delegate to one person who does the mining. So they've already got solutions for that.
Okay.
Already. And the Taproot upgrade that's happening very soon will also be a little bit more energy friendly. A lot of miners moved to Ecuador, which adopted Bitcoin as a side currency, and they're going to be using volcano power, which never would have happened if they weren't looking for more energy efficient solutions. And I would say why all those miners moved from China is because China needed that space on their power grid, and it just spurred innovation in looking for alternative sources of energy.
I don't think the environmental consideration of crypto is I mean, it's not nothing. It's certainly, there was a huge spike in the amount of energy that was being used, and you know, it was mostly dirty energy. And there's people who like set up mining rigs in literal fossil fuel fields in order to get the power directly. But like at the end of the day, crypto's all still just a Ponzi scheme. So I just don't see that it has any longevity. It sucks that it's environmentally unfriendly, but it's on top of that, or, you know, it's getting more environmentally friendly, but on top of that, it's still just like, you know, the same MLM scheme that Amway is doing.
I think it's hilarious too, because like I said, it got adopted by libertarian types who hate fiat currency, and there's literally nothing more fiat than any crypto. Because I mean, at least, you know, U.S. notes are backed by the U.S. government, so at least as long as the government exists, it has some value. But basically, crypto, it's just, you know, again, it's people decided it has a value, so it does. But it's really, it's not a currency. It's a speculative asset at best.
Okay. Some of them are closer to currencies than speculative assets, but a lot of the alternative, newer ones look closer to speculative assets or even stocks. And that's why the SEC is fighting with Ripple right now.
Coinbase was supposed to back some of this stuff, and it turned out that it was totally a lie. You know, like they couldn't back any of it, or like they had maybe 10% or something.
If you were to say it's a wash, the things that make fiat currency fiat are the same between the US dollar and Bitcoin. The advantage of Bitcoin to the libertarians is those that believe that we should not have any wars whatsoever know that governments can just print money in order to fund their wars.
Right. Well,
so with decentralized currency that no country can just print more money in order to fund their wars, if people all over the world adopted this as the currency, no government could just do that, go into debt to fund a war.
Right. And it's a misnomer to say that the US dollar is a total fiat currency, because it's not. It's petrodollars that are backing it. We don't back it with gold, but like, yes, the US dollar being connected to petrodollars is why we have so many wars. I'm not sure that crypto necessarily solves this. I mean, I think we're going to have to wait a few decades to maybe see how it all shakes out. But I have my doubts that crypto is actually going to limit the amount of wars that the U.S. finds itself in.
Okay.
Well, I agree with Dwight Eisenhower. I mean, the fact is we've got the military-industrial complex insinuated in all 50 states. And therefore, all of our elected representatives have constituents that are in that category, you know, and until we solve that, like Eisenhower said in his final speech, until we solve that problem, we have to guard against the military-industrial complex becoming too powerful, and we've dropped the ball. I'm not sure if it was my parents' generation or my generation, but we definitely dropped the ball.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean,
it was you personally, Paul.
I thought so, but I didn't want to. You know, now I'm going to get death threats and everything like that.
You go in Paul's house and he's got the ball and it's got a big crack on it.
Everything's my fault. It was all my idea in the first place because I'm a solipsist. So this is all, you know, DNA was my idea. You know.
Yeah. I mean, I've said this before, but it bears repeating. Is that, you know, anytime a solipsist argues with you about something, just you can get them to shut up by pointing out that they're arguing with themselves.
Which is we do all the time. How many times do you argue with yourself every day, Joe?
Well, I mean, it's not necessarily the case because solipsists love argument. So like you point that out, it's like, no, you're just telling me what I already know about why I'm doing this.
You know, the thing is, and mind you, I don't have a problem with soft solipsists so much because they're like, you know, it's the hard solipsists. I'm like,
I'm a hard solipsist. Absolutely. Yeah. No, and as I've said before, I'm a nihilist. I mean, technically speaking, I'm an exilist. An exilist is a positive nihilist, somebody who believes we can't tell if this is a simulation or not, but we need to participate in it as presented. Why else? Like if this is GTA, why do you play GTA? To play the game. This is the game that's presented to us, so play it to the best of your ability and do as much good as you possibly can. But there is no evidence that any of this exists, and there's no meaning external to our own skull.
Thank you, Mr. Buddha. I mean, I feel refreshed because that is actually quite like what the Buddha used to say back in the day. I don't know if you've ever studied that scripture, but yeah, none of this is real, but it is.
I read the
universe is only as real as
years ago, but I don't know too much about it.
Well, you sounded quite like the Buddha then. You genuinely did. I'm not
makes me angry.
No, solipsism is a superpower, and I'll tell you, like one of the things that has been true in my life, and you know, in a weird way, comes from the Matrix, although it wasn't one of the primary focuses. But the reason that Neo couldn't make the original jump, and he, fell into the street, is because he didn't believe he could make the jump. As soon as you start, or really as soon as you stop believing in the absoluteness of reality, then you do have the ability to sort of bend or break some of these rules. Now, I don't mean that necessarily literally. Even if this is a simulation, the simulation has rules that we aren't able to, change we don't have a cheat code for. But, I'm an artist. I operate on hubris. There's no way I can't. I can't, coming from the incredible poor background that I have, and the fact that I had very few opportunities. I mean, more than most of my classmates, because I was one of 7 white kids at my school. But it was, in the American system, I'm not supposed to be able to make it. And I don't believe that capitalism is the access to the ladder that other people believe it is. It is my sort of belief in my own ability, out of reason, in a Dunning-Kruger level of hubris here. I accept jobs continually, building things that I've never built before, I have no experience in, and only perpetuated by my sort of absurd belief that I can learn enough and do the job well enough to deliver it by the time, the deadline comes for the budget that's afforded me. And I've somehow managed to do that, which only increases my solipsism.
See, the thing is that if the reason why I can't believe in solipsism, at least hard solipsism anyway, is that means that I invented the concept of solipsism and have tortured myself with it over the years, and that would mean I must hate myself.
I'm going to have to sit you down and bore you to tears with all this stuff, Joe. I'm going to have to sit you down and really, 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 really make you want to strangle me with the whole solipsis thing.
I hate to tell you this, but there's nothing about hard solipsism that says you're the one who invented the concept for yourself. You are not necessarily the main character in your own life. You can absolutely be an NPC.
Well, then I either hate if I'm in a simulation, then I hate the simulator creator.
An atheist who hates his
whether
God.
it's Tom Brady or Elon Musk.
Well, that's the thing. You think about it. If I'm living in a simulation and you guys are all phantoms of that, then there is a God. It just happens to be the person who created and plugged me into the simulation.
Well, I mean, this is the concept that Dark Matter 2525 has been exploring in his series about, his sort of science fiction animated series that explores the origins of a Abrahamic God. It is from sort of an atheistic perspective, a possible sort of scientific or at least science fiction approach to understanding what a God might be.
That series is still ongoing.
I believe every time I think it's done, he uploads a new episode and he has more lore. So,
I don't watch nearly as much YouTube as I used to. Seriously, like maybe once every couple of weeks I'll watch a video. That's how minimal it has gotten. But I mean, I was following that series. I was loving it. It was fantastic when they asked the students to, create a god and then create a world. Right at the very beginning, I was like, "Oh, this is going to get wild."
Yeah.
The student created the god character that Dark Matter has been using all these years. It was just like, "Oh, that's wild. I see what you're doing."
Yeah. See, the funny thing is, for me, again, I'm kind of like, well, I am stuck in that game. So it's not even remotely interesting whether or not it's real.
Well, that's the did you ever read the book by Herman Hesse called Siddhartha?
I've heard of it.
I had that on my shelf for so long and I never ended up cracking it.
It's one of those easy books. You can read it in like a day or a day and a half. And basically Siddhartha lived back in the time of the Buddha, and he actually encounters the Buddha in the book. But he goes on this massive spiritual journey, and at the end of it, he basically says what you just said: whether this is real or not, it is of the same nature as I am, and therefore I have to behave as if it is, you know. If this is all illusion, then so am I.
Yeah, and
basically.
not only that, as somebody who doesn't really believe in free will or even the concept of choice, at least from a neuroscience perspective, if you are afforded any choice, it is at that point of hard solipsism where you must decide whether or not to participate in the world and believe in it.
Well, that's the thing, though. Like, if I was a hard determinist, I mean, I get that there's at least there's a certain amount of soft determinism, and because a soft determinist can believe that there are choices still, but that's still going to create a causal chain and all that. But basically, if I was really a hard determinist, then there really wouldn't even be any point in getting angry at anybody, because literally everything that happens is effectively fate.
Yeah, well, that's a freeing thing too, just as freeing as hard solipsism.
Not to me.
I love you, Joe.
I mean, I'll say this: I don't have a lot of agreements with Sam Harris on many things, but there's this one thing that he talked about that I think is really useful, where he talks about the being attacked by a bear. If you go to Yellowstone Park, you get outside of the fence, and you're hanging out in the field, and a bear attacks you and you get mauled, but you survive it. You can come back to that park years later, and you've got the scars and everything, but you're with friends and you're like, oh, there's the grizzly bear, that's the one who got me, wow, he's so majestic and everything else. If that same scenario happens with an axe maniac in a parking lot of a Piggly Wiggly, you're going to hold the axe murderer accountable in a way you're not going to hold the bear. You're going to hold the trauma in a worse way, in a more personal way than you would with the bear. It's the same thing. And if you can treat the axe-wielding maniac the same way you can treat the bear, you're in a lot better stead emotionally to deal with all of the things that are problems in the world. I mean,
I think then you'd actually have no impetus to change it, because you actually are, whether you do or don't do, you didn't decide to do it.
Well, I got news for you about whether or not you have impetus to change something. I mean, it's a long causal chain that goes back infinitely. There's an infinite regression, whichever direction you go. But the thing is what we know about neuroscience is that if we are just pinballs reacting to everything in our environment, then changing the environment changes the trajectory of that pinball. And that's motivation enough to want to change the geometry of the pinball machine.
Right, but then that doesn't sound like hard determinism then.
Yeah, because that presupposes that free will can change. That free will exists. Basically, it presupposes that hard determinism isn't really happening.
It doesn't, because my choice to want to restructure the pinball machine is a reaction to the shape of the pinball machine,
which makes it not a choice.
Right,
it's not a choice, but that doesn't mean that you don't move forward and change it. Just because you're doing something that that you hope will benefit and change the world doesn't mean you do it. Like the whether or not you make a choice doesn't matter. Just do it. Whether or not.
Telling somebody to just do it doesn't. It means if you couldn't help but to say that.
But here's the thing: is somebody who might be on the fence, who doesn't feel like changing things or doesn't think that they could.
There's no on the fence. That's just it. There's no on the fence.
There is. Here's the great thing about it. Like, believe me, that you can go deeper and deeper. There's more levels to this. There are so many levels. This is the Inception game.
It's all to me. It's all this.
No, but if we are dominoes that are reacting to a former chain of events, which neuroscience seems to indicate.
A lot of conditionals there.
Well,
see, that's my whole point. It's like, basically, I'm never going to be. I seriously doubt that we'll ever know during my lifetime. So it's a question I don't even care the answer, because I have to act. I have no choice but to act like I have free will.
That's true. Absolutely. Everybody, it's, the most persistent illusion that we have in our daily life is that we have, free will and that we're in control of things when, our gut has more control over what we do in the next half hour or an hour, than premeditation necessarily does. Which, by the way, I'm hungry. So I do want to end this show so I can go get something to eat. But
wish I had a White Castle.
Even our discussion like this is part of that pinball machine. This discussion.
No, because I would have chosen not to be part of that.
No, it's more evidence you don't have the choice, because what ends up happening is
I do. I can hit leave studio and then.
So do it. Prove you have the choice. I love it because would he have pressed the button if I hadn't?
Kazoom, does that count as bullying?
What?
Was that bullying?
Was that what?
Bullying.
No.
I mean, he dared him to leave, and he's like, "Do it," and you made him leave.
It's probably about time for a number of people though to feel like it's a night. So
yeah, it's 100% pumpkin time.
It's also peer pressure, not bullying, but peer pressure.
Yeah, it was definitely peer pressure, but it was also it's the funniest instance of proving somebody doesn't have free will.
And I chose.
What's the difference? What's the actual difference between peer pressure and bullying?
Well, I
volume.
Could imagine that you can really only tell by the effect.
Well, I guess some of it could be some of it could be intent behind why you're doing something.
Intensity.
Yeah.
I mean, you can experience peer pressure from your friends, but bullying not so much. Your friends aren't going to bully you. So
right.
Well, that's a good way to look at it.
People who pretend to be your friend could bully you.
That's true.
Yeah,
I mean, peer pressure isn't necessarily meant to make someone feel bad, but bullying is designed to make someone feel bad.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
Well, the thing is, but both could also be trying to elicit some sort of response or action on the part of the recipient.
So Proctor Hawk is bringing up Sad Boy in the comments.
What is it? See, this is the thing, like that whole thing about the Solipsism and determinism. To me, it's kind of like I might have mentioned this before, but one video that I want to do is that I want to do 10 questions atheists don't need to answer, because it's the usual bullshit like, well, where did everything come from? No fucking idea. And not only do I not know, I don't even give a shit. I don't fucking care. I don't fucking care. It appears to be here to the best of my ability to discern. So what I might have mild intellectual curiosity, but it has no impact on my life whatsoever.
Yeah, but you could say the exact same thing about watching an episode of Star Trek.
Right. But at least Star Trek, I get some enjoyment out of it. Star Trek, I get zero enjoyment of the whole thing, man. About the whole, again, all of that.
Oh, I don't know if, I mean, we watch horror films too that don't necessarily make us feel good. There's plenty of reasons to be forced to look at something.
People who like horror, they get obviously some enjoyment out of it, even if they like being scared or whatever it is. There's some sort of endorphin rush that they're getting.
Roller coasters.
Yeah, but there's also, I mean, maybe Michael can back me up on this, the idea of engaging with something that is difficult for you as a form of therapy.
Aversion therapy.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's like...
Yeah, like handling a tarantula because you've got a fear of spiders to get over your fear of spiders, that kind of thing.
Are you afraid of spiders?
I am.
No.
I am.
How about snakes?
Very much.
I'm not afraid of spiders at all, but I've had 3 tarantulas in my life, or I haven't had them personally, but my women had them. And I have not got the balls to grab a tarantula. Even if someone shows me how to do it, I haven't got the balls to do it. I openly admit that. Not because I'm afraid of spiders, because I'm not afraid of it. I'll look at it and, be this close to it, but I will not have it crawling on my skin. No.
Well, yeah, I just don't like, I don't like things crawling on me. So,
right.
Other than a dog. So yeah, to me, it's more of the tactile sensation is unpleasant.
I did it to myself. I don't know how old I was when Arachnophobia came out, but I saw it in the theater and I liked it a lot, even though it scared me. And for whatever reason, I went back 8 more times. Every time. By the last 2 times, I couldn't finish the movie.
So when I was like a teenager, young teenager, 13 or so, I started smoking. The first cigarette made me sick. I puked. Sick. Made me so terribly sick. So I smoked another one. Also made me sick. And I kept trying it until I stopped getting sick.
Or you're trying to look cool, fit in, all that.
Yeah, peer pressure. But I mean, it was this whole thing where I kind of forced myself, to get used to it. My body was reacting in a way that didn't agree with what my brain wanted to do, so I fixed that.
See, I could probably do that if I ate enough pizzas with pineapple on them, but so far I think pineapple and pizza don't go together.
See, here's the thing, though. I don't ever do that. Like if I have a choice to not do something that I find unpleasant, I don't. I mean, sometimes.
Well, it's like I feel that way with weightlifting. Like people, they pick up something heavy and they go, put it down.
I mean, and I actually find most horror films boring. They tend to be incredibly predictable and stupid. It's either that they're either incredibly predictable and stupid, or it's like the gore movie where it's not really scary. It's more of like disgusting. And again, I'm not upset about it. I just not interested in it.
Hey, yes. Yeah. I've never had it, but I can imagine it. Yes.
Well, ham and pineapple go together pretty well. But I can't imagine cheese and pineapple going together. To me, it's just terrible.
And I'm vegetarian, and I love pineapple on my pizza.
Yeah, I don't see a problem with pineapple and cheese together. Like, I don't know. Pineapple goes with a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
like it goes.
I mean, look at some people put
cottage cheese with pineapple in it. That you can get in any grocery store.
Yeah.
Some people. Some people put cheddar cheese on apple pie, and I don't understand that one at all.
I don't get that one either. And I love cheddar cheese, and I love apple pie. The two great things that don't go great together, in my opinion.
There's actually a scientific reason for this, and I can't recall it exactly, but if you see the channel, Adam Ragusa, he's the guy who talks about, the science of things. There are certain things in both apples and cheddar that when combined create a third thing, or there's a chemical reaction. There's actually a taste bud reason for why that combination exists.
Now, I can see that happening with certain things. Like a friend of mine, he was when he was in the Army, he was in 5th Infantry in Louisiana. So I was going down to Louisiana for the first time, and he told me, he says, if you try boudin, you're going to find these guys on the side of the road selling boudin, and get boudin. He said it comes with like a remoulade, mustard. He said you have to eat you got to get the side thing to go, the sauce to go with the boudin, or else you're not going to like it. So I was in Baton Rouge, and I tried it. I took a taste of the boudin, and I was like, ugh. And then I took a taste of the sauce, and I was like, ugh. And I'm remembering his word. He said, dude, you have to do it together. So, all right, fine. And I tried them together and tasted it. And it was like they each were bringing something that the other was missing, but together the overlap that you tasted.
See, now I can like apples and cheese together, just apples and cheese. I mean, yeah, I've heard of that. I thought everybody heard of that. That's a pretty common, normal thing because they do go well together. It's the apple pie with cheese, to me, that seems strange.
Well, the thing
I've never heard of apples going with cheese other than apple pie, so I don't know.
You can get an apple cheese Danish, but then that's more like a cream cheese,
Right.
and you can tell though, and that's
yeah, cream cheese is different.
Cheddar and apple slices, though, like on a tray. I mean, I've seen that. I mean, I don't know. It always seemed kind of normal to me.
I don't like
a little bit of salt too. Ooh.
There is sort of an East Coast thing about it, though. I mean, I know that. I mean, my mom was from Philadelphia originally, so that was kind of where I learned it, and it's not something that I see in California or on the West Coast very much. So that might be why Kazum hasn't run into it.
Now, one thing I have done with apple that it seemed weird to me at the time, but I did it and it worked out. Was I made it's a type of Alsatian flatbread called Flammkuchen in French, or in German, or in French it's called tarte flambée. And basically it's caramelized onions, and it's creme fraiche and Gruyere cheese. Now it's really good, but it's really rich. And so one day when I was making it, I grated some apple onto it, and the apple dissolved, so there wasn't any apple left, in pieces when you ate it, but the flavor was there, and it didn't taste like apple. You just got the sweetness and the tartness from the apple, and that balanced out the richness of the dairy, and it was awesome.
Fry up some pears. That's good.
Proctor Hawk has something in common with me, and I'm going to put it up right here because this is something I thought I was the only person in the world, is that I'm not a big fan of apple pie. Well, I'm not a fan of pie at all.
Peaches.
I don't like pie. If I want to have fruit, I want to eat it. I don't want to eat it with pastry and a bunch of sugar. I want to eat my fruit. You know what I mean?
Okay, how about chocolate pie? It's the cooked variety of chocolate pudding with homemade pie crust.
No.
Okay.
Banana.
I'm a big fan of pumpkin pie. Pumpkin pie is my favorite.
Sweet potato.
It smells great, but I can't stand the taste and texture of it.
Oh, really?
Well, sweet potato pie is much more dense. But do you like cheesecake?
Me? Yeah.
Paul.
No, I don't like cheesecake at all.
Oh,
I don't like cheesecake. I don't like any kind of pie, including meat pies. Like in Britain, they make a lot of different kinds of meat pies. And
I like meat pies.
I'm not a big fan. I mean, I can eat a meat pie, and I can put a meat pie down because it doesn't disgust me. And I can do the same thing with fruit pies. It's not like they're terrible. It's just like, if I want to have strawberries, I'll have strawberries. I don't put them in a fucking pie with a bunch of pastry and shit on it.
So is the pie crust that you particularly don't like? You're not into the pie crust?
It's not just, it's my own personal quirk, because it's like, I'm one of these guys who doesn't like to mix a lot of stuff up, with a few exceptions. Like if I have a hot dog, for example, I'll just have the meat in the bun. I don't want anything else on my hot dog, man. Same with a hamburger, right? And I just like everything. I like my food separate. I don't like it all mashed together. You know what I mean? Pieces are a good exception to that, and curry is another exception to that.
I got a question. Are you a fan of cilantro? Just out of curiosity.
I don't know.
Oh,
I am.
That's unusual for someone to not know, because usually cilantro is one of those things you either love or hate. If you hate it, you think it tastes. If you hate it, you think it tastes like soap. If you love it, you don't know how to describe how it tastes.
Here's the thing that's kind of funny about that, though, is that like when I first had cilantro, I didn't like it, but it didn't taste like soap to me. The thing is that it appears in a lot of things. A lot of times people put it in the salsa. It's in a lot of Mexican things. So I guess that's the exception of me not doing anything I don't like to do. It was usually in small enough quantities that I could get around it.
Yeah,
but
to
now
me it tastes like
gasoline.
Cilantro. It's awful.
Now I love cilantro, and I went from not liking it to loving it.
That's interesting, but I like everything the way it comes, more or less. I mean, I don't mind spicing up my food necessarily, like putting spices all over my beef when I'm making beef or whatever is awesome. But I don't like to put gravy on my food or use sauces or condiments or any of that stuff. I hate ketchup. I hate mustard. I hate mayonnaise. I don't like pickle relish. None of that stuff.
How about ranch?
Nope. I don't like salad dressing at all. I have salad.
At least they agree with you on the ranch.
Yeah, ranch is nasty. Blue cheese is where it's at. You really threw me with that pie thing there, Paul. But see, one thing that Suzanne makes though, it's more like a galette. She'll get preferably really, really good puff pastry, and then she basically makes like the apple filling, and then stuffs that and then bakes it, and that's like my all-time favorite dessert.
Well, friends, I think I need to wind the show down. It's getting to be that time. All this talk about food and everything is making Jack hungry. I can see it on your face.
I gotta get out of here.
Anyway, so I would like to thank everybody in the comment section for being reasonable and for hanging around for 4 hours, near enough. And obviously thank all of you for joining me here this weekend. And we'll come back again and do it next week on the breakfast. Oh, go ahead.
Really quick. I think this, at least to my memory, this is the first time we had all 7 of us on, 7 people in the broadcast simultaneously.
For a long time. I mean, when I first got the prescription to StreamYard last year, which I've just renewed, we had I think the most we've ever had on the screen at one time was 10 people.
Oh, wow.
And that was full. That's as many as you can have. And the second most that we had one night where we had 8 people. And we had, I'm pretty sure you were here, Joe. We had Tool Time Peter, and we had Zonstar at the same time, and another oldie, Phil came on.
Right, yeah.
All on at the same time. And it was like 2009.
Yeah, it's true. I forgot about that night. Yeah.
So everybody watching, just remember, come back next week to see who I yell at next.
That's a good point. Let's do that. And anyway, thanks for watching, everybody, and all your ups and downs. Have